All right, let's call the January 10th Hinesburg Planning Commission meeting to order. So first agenda item is agenda changes. Anyone know of any agenda changes for tonight? Guess not. All right, let's move on to number 2. Public comments for non-agenda items. I assume everybody in the audience is here for an agenda item.
I mean, is it worth asking which item? I mean, would it be worth, except Alex, you said that you talked to someone over the phone and told him to come in the second hour if he was interested in the retail cap.
Yeah, Bob
Discussion.
Peoples called and wondered how long the first agenda item would go. I said, I don't know, it's hard for me to predict, but my guess is an hour.
I prefer to stay with the agenda. It gives people an idea of what the order is.
Yeah, it's just that Alex posted about the retail cap on Front Porch Forum, and that may be bringing folks out.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. I mean, it's 50-50. If we reverse the agenda, right, we could miss some people. If we don't reverse the agenda, right,
let's stick to the agenda and get to it.
all right. All right, so let's go into number 3, housekeeping changes to zoning and subdivision regulations. All right, I think we had a pretty good public hearing. December 13th, I think that I definitely gained some perspective from other Hinesburg residents. I'm sure that everybody else felt the same way. I think there were a number of hot button issues, both from the standpoint of written information as well as information that was brought out in the meeting itself. I don't know, Alex, if it's worth bringing up I think the minutes did a really good job of outlining that meeting, or perhaps we can start with the written correspondence. We acknowledged it at the December 13th meeting, but I don't think we really talked about it.
Yeah, and what I tried to do is provide you that summary document with everyone's comments, both what was verbal at the hearing and written in red italics underneath the relevant topic. So however you want to go through it, but at least they're all in there, along with the actual written comments.
Yeah. Well, again, let's stick with the agenda. So first bullet point is December 13th public hearing feedback. Open that up.
Do you want to just walk through the summary document, Joe, and
Sure.
and take it in order?
Sure.
I think Andrea had a comment on one of the items on page 1, in which she was recommending that you consider requiring a setback for parking lots, roads, and driveways. And this housekeeping change was meant to codify our long-standing practice in which we don't require setbacks for those things.
Why don't we?
Because setbacks have traditionally been related to structures, and if so for example, we don't require a permit to build a driveway. So if we don't require a permit for it, but we do require a setback, it's hard to help people understand that there is a required setback because they never come and talk to us about it. Whereas with structures, people are generally in the office getting a permit, and it's at that point that the zoning administrator can say, show me a map, where are you placing this? Oh, by the way, you got to move it 10 feet. Driveways, we don't have that level of oversight, So that's one reason. The other is that there are plenty of situations where driveways are right near or on the property line, especially when they're shared driveways. So requiring a setback can can make it difficult to make that happen. I think that in the development review board reviews of subdivisions, there's been discussion about driveway offsets to allow a little bit of space for snow plowing and runoff, so it doesn't flop over on somebody else's property. But that can often be accommodated with a very small offset, as opposed to our more traditional 20 and 30-foot setbacks for structures. So there are a number of reasons why we haven't applied setbacks to roads and driveways. We do have a setback from streams for parking lots. It's in a different section of the regs. But again, we don't, our practice has not been to require setbacks for things like roads and driveways.
You know, I know in a lot of cases, like for driveways in private roads, you know, accessing land behind a piece of property that, you know, sits on a public right of way, I mean, that, you know, that ownership that is up front could be fairly narrow, you know, 50 feet, something like that. So if you're going to put a road in at, you know, 20 to 24 feet, you subtract that from 50, divide that by 2, you're not approaching the, you know, 20 or 30 foot setbacks that, you know, we would require for a structure.
Why would we want to have, just for parking and drives, a setback? Why would we want to do that? I think, that the reason that the first reason you gave as to why we don't do it is because we don't do it. That's all you were really saying. Our regulations have never included that, and so that's a reason we don't do it. I don't think that's a valid argument, but I do wonder, why do we want to set back a driveway or some other non-structure from the edge? Maybe we don't.
It speaks to the reason to have setbacks in the first place, and some of it is because we always have done it, which isn't a good answer on that front either. But you know, most zoning stems from very early zoning regulations where, you know, somebody in New Jersey was trying to, you know, create subdivisions with regular lots that fronted on a road and everything was to be laid out nice and neat. But in general, I think my understanding of setbacks is to provide some elbow room for neighbors so that they don't get in each other's business right up to the property line. So whether that's, you know, having a building setback enough so as not to shade another property or another structure on a neighbor's property, or if it's a privacy issue, or if it's just a property line issue where property lines are sometimes not distinct or well understood in terms of their exact location, and so requiring a setback from them helps reduce the possibility of somebody building on their neighbor's property inadvertently. From the front yard standpoint, front yard setbacks are from the road, not from a neighbor's property line. And, you know, the reason for those are varied as well. It does keep houses back from the road in order to provide some kind of a streetscape. It also provides enough room such that if the town at some point in the future needed to widen the right-of-way beyond what it owns today, to put in a bike path or to make the road wider, that you don't have to knock a house down in the process of doing that, because we've kept these houses a little bit, you know, back from the road. Sure. So those are some of the typical reasons that we have setbacks. Whether those reasons are applicable to a road or a driveway, it depends on your point of view.
We allow fences right on the property line.
Absolutely, and frequently recommend.
This could be a structure 8 feet high and solid wood.
And often we recommend
Concrete
that they be placed right on the property line so that
Right.
if it's known, both neighbors know, you know, who owns what.
I'm not arguing for setbacks on driveways or not, just there seem to be some odd inconsistencies between what we do want to set back and what we don't want to set back.
I mean, thinking about this, you know, I kind of formed a differentiation between parking lots and roads slash driveways. I mean, parking lot to me seems like it's a larger I'll call it a static use, where there might want to be, you know, we might want room for some separation in there, screening, you know, bushes, trees, whatever, to allow
Filtering.
that possibility. If it comes right up to the property line, we kind of take that away. I also think about it more is a larger stormwater issue. You know, certainly driveways and roads are stormwater issues as well, but the more impervious surface you make, right? The bigger it is, the closer you push it to your neighbor, the less, you know, less mitigation there is before you're causing someone else trouble.
Right. So there may be some reasons to reconsider beyond just structures, buildings, because it doesn't include structures in my mind. Retaining walls, fences are structures, but right now we don't set them back. Maybe we need to consider all of that closely.
So procedurally, I think there are two ways you can approach what comments you get at a public hearing on a set of regs. One is to say, hey, that comment we don't agree with, it's not relevant, whatever, we're going to proceed. Another way is to say that comment made a good point, and we ought to change our proposal to address what they brought up.
Sure.
Another option is to say, and this is one I would hope you would think about in this particular case is, this change was meant to be a simple clarification. The comment raised an issue that was more complicated than the change thought the issue was. So let's take that under advisement and kick that to a future discussion to make that change after more substantive discussion, research, what have you. So you could do that now and wrap that into this set of regulation changes, or you could say, well, clearly we thought this was a nothing change and it's not a nothing change. Let's not make the change and let's put it on our list of things to spend some more time on later.
I would second that because if we have an hour to go through the housekeeping changes, we've already used a quarter of our time on one comment on one of these items, and we've got a whole bunch to go. And I think a couple of them are going to require some discussion. So if we have any hope at all of getting through this tonight, which I think is our goal, then maybe we could be a little judicious about what we turn into larger discussions.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that purely from the standpoint of moving the discussion forward. I meant in terms of whether you want to keep this change as part of the housekeeping changes at all, or just jettison it and say it's out. There was a good point raised, and we just need further discussion. This will no longer be part of the housekeeping changes, and we'll take it up as a future zoning change when we have more time to flesh it out. But it's up to you how you want to proceed. I don't want to discount any public comments and your ability to wrap them into the current change. But again, these set of housekeeping changes were largely meant to clarify, correct, make minor modifications, not necessarily open up new cans of worms, although we have done that in some of the changes.
I think clarification is good, and we can always come back to this if we decide to come back to setbacks. So I would move to keep it in.
Keep it in discussion?
If
or-
you want to come back to it, I mean, we can strike it. We can basically let the DRB do its thing without guidance and promise to come back to it, or we can codify it and then decide we're going to change it in the future. Yeah, those are really the two options. Right. So,
What would it look like if we codified it?
well, I
Left
mean,
it for the
you know,
future.
it would basically say that you know, setbacks apply to structures, not to other forms of land development. So, you know, you could have zero setback for that parking lot. Now, you know, the information we got on this was that the DRB is more or less been this is codifying something that's been happening right along, right? Clarifying, agreeing with it. So really either policy is gonna have the same net result in front of the DRB, whether we write this guidance in or whether we leave the DRB alone for the time being. Right? The only thing that would change that is if we rewrote this and said, no, X, Y, and Z are like structures.
Well,
Right,
are
and
our regulations right now telling the DRB, this is up to you guys? Is this a conditional use? Is this something you're to review and decide upon on your own? Do we say
Well,
that now?
It's really by omission, right? We
Right.
don't
We don't
we don't give
tell them to do
guidance,
that.
right?
Well-
So it's up to, right, the judgment of the judiciary body.
What the regulations currently say is that all land development activity is required to meet setback and lot coverage requirements. Land development, as defined in our regs, includes nearly everything. So you could make the argument it does in fact include driveways, roads, parking lots, excavation, gardens. Land development is a very broad definition. Our zoning administrators over time, not so much the DRB, but our zoning administrators have made the determination that it's really structures that was intended, and that's what the setbacks have been applied to. So the language is broad now, and this housekeeping change was to just codify it to the way the practice has been.
Irregardless, we have setbacks for driveways and parking lots as it relates to streams and that type of thing, right?
We have setbacks for parking lots with regard to streams, and through the commercial industrial design standards, we have a minimum 5-foot setback for parking lots from property lines.
Okay.
So parking lots do get some treatment elsewhere in the regs outside of the dimensional standards in Table 1. Driveways and roads do not really get that treatment anywhere else. So the only time that those get thought about is during a DRB review process when, they're thinking about snow plowing and stormwater runoff.
I mean, my personal thought on this is we pull section 253 for now. Leave things as they are. I think that as we have more of a discussion, right, we're going to think about all those things under land use that Alex just cited, and a whole bunch more, right? And we're going to have to figure out, some way to define which one or many of those land uses fit setbacks, or maybe they fit a different setback than what's in there for a structure. I think that's very involved and no longer housekeeping.
I agree.
Yeah, I do too. Further discussion at another point.
Good point.
So delete 253, the change to 253, leave it as it is.
For now.
All right, got it.
All right, so I think the next one is section 545, number 1.
Yes, internally illuminated signs. And your planning commission's proposal to prohibit them.
I think the biggest comment, area that I remember on this was we should have been tougher. It's kind of generalization.
Yeah, all the comments received were via email, and there were 4 of them, and they were all in favor. In favor of your proposal to prohibit these kinds of signs.
I mean, myself, I would like to leave 545, number 1, as written in the proposal.
I would too.
All right, any discussion? All right, don't let me be a tyrant. Section 5611, drive-through window service.
Yeah,
This was a
Stuart
major
spoke,
topic.
Stuart spoke at length about this at your public hearing.
Right.
So I can speak because I think I was one of the people that was all for no more drive-throughs. So I watched the whole. I wasn't here at the meeting, the last one, but I watched the whole thing on VCAM, so I'm up to speed. Having watched that, hearing the public comment, having spoken with other residents about it, maybe I'm kind of changing my tune a little bit in terms of a wholesale prohibition. What really struck me was the conversations, not only about people who might have a hard time walking into the stores, but just, kids, parents with kids, things like that. It's convenient. I will say some of the comments were concerned about curbside service, and I was never suggesting to, like the ability to go to Obashan and pull around back to fill your car up or pull up in front of a store and have somebody give you that. That was never my intent. It was more around your traditional, banks and things like that. But I don't know. I'd like to see it limited somehow. And I know we do it on restaurants, and I think that's good to keep that. But it seems to be, it's a lot less black and white, and maybe it's more of a case by case basis because I can't, you know what I mean? There's a lot more to it than just aesthetics or cars or that type of thing that I admittedly need to take into consideration. So.
I mean, I think aesthetics is one thing. I mean, my personal opinion on this is that, drive-throughs and the way I think about drive-throughs, the Dunkin' Donuts, the McDonald's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's poor land use in an area where we want, reasonable to high density.
Right.
And yes, I get the argument about small kids. I get the argument about people who have less mobility. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, my wife's handicapped. She has a handicap tag on her car, right? She only uses it, right? She used it at work when she had to lug a big bag with a ThinkPad in, and otherwise, she forces herself to walk. I'm not, I'm not saying that everybody can do that, right? But I don't want people to think about, being handicapped is you must have this. You don't,
I like Jeff's
Shades.
idea, what Jeff said, and that's what I said last summer. I'm the one who first protested it. I think it should be handled on a case-by-case basis. And I'm all for being against it for the restaurants, we've had that all along. But I think for a drugstore or a bank, boy, I think it should be addressed when they make their application and looked at by the DRB. I think
I mean, the one thing, you can think about putting it into conditional use, but then think about what that condition set would need to be. And I think that's going to be extremely hard for the DRB, right, to differentiate. I mean, what conditions would you put on it? I mean, when I see a conditional review, what I think is you can do it, you just have to meet some conditions. Okay, maybe it's that it looks nice and there's nice, there's nice trees or whatever on it. Maybe that it has a roof over it, et cetera. But you can essentially do it. You're planning in some land use for that.
Well, I know my first thought of being against the drive-throughs, a lot of it had to do with, to your point, the density in the village core, and we want it to be walkable and kind of counter to that, right? With making it more accessible just for cars to come in and go and commuter versus a livable village. But yeah, it's a tough one because I've heard persuasive arguments on both sides, and so I'd like to see it. I don't know how you'd write a regulation to say we err on the side of not doing, but there are cases that are, and it's very hard to do. Once you open it up to one, it's very hard to,
So one way is to do exactly what Joe suggested, which is clearly call it out as a conditional use in these districts, and then the DRB, when they're reviewing a project, will look at those 7 or 8 conditional use standards, which all start with shall not have an adverse effect on, and they'll have to make sure it doesn't have these adverse effects. I think the more pinpoint way of doing it is to write a special little section that says drive-through windows and have it talk about the community's intent to minimize them, and the regulation intent to have them looked at on a case-by-case basis and demonstrate that they're A, necessary, and B, designed so as to have the least impact on pedestrian access, safety, aesthetics, whatever traffic flow, whatever those criteria are. But I think that if you want to do that, I would recommend we do what you did for that last suggestion and just boot this out of the housekeeping changes and deal with it as part of the village growth larger rezoning effort, because it really is specific to the village growth area.
Frankly, if we're worried about serving customers with mobility issues, I'm gonna say a dirty word, I'm gonna say the word Hannaford in this meeting. I mean, they have this new model with, to go. People park, they can shut their car off, they're not idling in a line, They dial a phone number, someone brings their stuff to them. It's not a drive-through, right? It's using the same parking structures that everybody else uses. It has the same impact for non-mobility. You don't have to get out of your car.
For whatever reason, whether your kids are in the back seat or whether
Or you just
can't walk.
don't want to get out of the car. I mean,
So it sounds like that doesn't fall under, that isn't.
That's
drive-through.
not a
that's not my,
drive-
I
that's
mean,
not a
maybe
drive-through.
we
That's the
need to work
curbside
on the
service
definition of drive-through, but that to me is not drive-through.
That's
That-
more like curbside service.
The
except it's in
Essex
parking
Hannaford,
lot.
as I mentioned at the last meeting, has both. So they have special parking spots for what Joe described, and they have a drive-through. Like literally, you drive up to a window and somebody's handing you stuff. It boggles my mind that works with groceries, but they just built this. They just expanded the store, so they do both.
But Alex, wouldn't that fit in our restaurant area of the rule? We don't allow it for us.
Well, no, our definition of restaurant is
Strictly a restaurant.
yeah, what you would think of as a restaurant. So, a grocery store, a drugstore providing product in a drive-through setting wouldn't be classified as a restaurant, even if it was food.
Well, I like your idea about throwing it out. I mean, not throwing it away down the road, because I think there's a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah, well, I don't get to decide that. You guys do. I'm just telling you what
I'm
some of your
just-
options are on that front.
I'll be honest, I am absolutely in favor of, the ban on restaurant drive-throughs, and I'm in favor of banning other, drive-throughs as well. It just doesn't fit with the whole walkable village thing, because you just have this stream of traffic around where, people are ideally walking, where we have sidewalks, and I just don't see it as compatible with our overall village vision. The only slight qualm I've had is, what if yet another bank, heaven knows we need another bank, wants to come in, and would that put them at a commercial disadvantage? But
Right. So
I'm in favor of keeping this.
Do you think the service where you pull into a parking space and stop and someone brings you the material
That sounds like
outside?
pulling into a parking space, which is not what we're talking about. We're talking
Right,
about
so
drive-throughs.
you keep those separate. The drive-throughs are what you're objecting to, not this other method of serving customers. Okay.
I mean, I think the curbside service, I think, is a good middle. I thought about that as well. Like when I heard the comments about, oh, well, I can't have the curbs. It's like, no, nobody said you can't have a curbside service. For me, it was more about the traffic flow and the town. I perceive drive-throughs as, yes, there's a mobility issue that I wasn't really thinking enough about, the convenience issue of the kids, but it's more about the traffic patterns. You know, drive-throughs are inherently meant for commuter traffic, going through town, stop, get your stuff quick, keep going, get out of town. That's not really what we're after here. We're trying to get a place that people stop, do their shopping, live and walk within the town. It's not, we don't want to end up a commuter town, I guess is where I'm coming from. So how do you offset that in a way that doesn't also impact the ability to do business, you know? And I don't think a drive-through is necessary for business, but I do see everybody expects one at a bank. Everyone expects one at a, you know, so how do you
Banks, I mean, the
you know?
business of banking itself is changing, you know?
Yeah, yes.
People, you know, people take pictures of their checks and
Yeah.
that's, you know, that's cashing their check. They're,
Yeah.
they're banking it. You know, people move money from account to account and, you know, use credit cards a heck of a lot more than they did 30 years ago.
I can't remember the last time I've been to a bank. Honestly.
If you own a business, a small business, I go to the bank at least 3 times a week. And I do
Point
go to the
taken.
drive-up window, I have
Well.
to say, I do, right here in town. Just sharing that with you.
Well, from my own personal experience, I really can't use a drive-up because I have to undo my seatbelt, roll down the window, or open the door because I can't reach the thing. So, you know,
It's a drive-through mobility program.
We don't even have to do anything about this curbside service. That's something that the
No.
business
So-
decides.
Right, so I think this is a great discussion. It's probably more involved than we had intended to get into tonight. So I guess what I'd like to do is poll the board, all right, and just give you a couple options, and one of them can be none of the above, right? But so the options could be keep 5, 6, 11 the way it is, right? Number 2, you know, and that's number 2, remove it, which basically says that we're permitting drive-throughs right now, and we'll get back to it in the future and decide. Well, like I said, number 3, none of the above. I'm trying to think of other options here. Make it number 4. Make it, you know, write it in a conditional use, and then we got to figure out how to
Define it
condition it.
there.
Which I think the conditions that are in that normal set are.
They're general, yeah,
I mean,
they're not necessarily
you
meant to
can-
apply to something as specific as the
Yeah.
drive-through bakeries
Yeah,
and.
I don't think they're gonna do anything to guarantee, you know, walkability or, you know, good use or whatever. So Maggie,
I forgot, what was number 1? Keep it as it
number 1 was
Sorry.
keep it as it is.
Meaning go forward with the proposal to prohibit.
Right. I would vote for that.
John,
1.
yeah.
2 or 3.
2 or 3?
2.
Okay,
Keep the change as proposed.
okay, Jeff,
Does my vote matter?
Yes.
yeah, I'd like to do that. Yeah, we're gonna put you on the record no matter what.
You're gonna have to tell us.
Wow. Is there a way to, well, maybe that's where the conditional use comments come in, where you say the curbside is the preferred method. You know, ban, I agree with keeping it, but do something about pointing out or saying curbside's okay, or is that just intended?
When it's wintertime, the curbside people aren't gonna be shutting their cars off.
Right.
You're not gonna be shutting your car off in a drive-through lineup either.
No, but you were thinking they were gonna shut their car off curbside.
I said
I
that.
doubt
No,
it.
I was more just for limiting the
Drive a Prius.
the
shut
traffic
itself
circle,
off.
basically, is what I was after. So, I'm gonna keep it as it is. I'll say number 1, and the curbside's there if they need it.
And to put myself on the record, I mean, I was pretty plain before. I'm a 1. I you know, I think this is the way we should go. So.
Okay, got it.
So, looks like we're keeping that one. Section 5.8. All right, so the first comment there was, can accessory apartments have accessory uses?
Peter raised this issue. This is this is very typical Peter Erb, like deep think.
Yeah.
But this has never been an issue.
This has never come up. This was a theoretical question. I had asked Peter, he's not in the audience, is he? I had asked Peter, like, think about that and let me know. He didn't let me know. But his comment was, I don't think it is allowable. Like, I think accessory uses are allowed for the principal use of the property, and not accessory to an accessory use. And I agree with that. I don't think that we would allow somebody living in an accessory apartment to then have accessory uses unto themselves, like a home occupation in an accessory apartment.
Well, so let's say, I generally agree with you. I wanna do a little devil's advocate stuff though. So let's say I live in an accessory apartment, and, you know, for employment, I basically work on the internet. I connect with my company who is 1,000 miles away. I generate no traffic, right? But part of my residence is my office, right? I mean, it's a home occupation.
Well, so we've, Peter, when he was here, and our zoning administrator since Peter, have all agreed that that scenario would not require a permit, does not fit our definition of a home occupation. If that person was running their own business and their home and their accessory apartment was the location of their business, and that's how it was advertised, and then it would be a question. And certainly if they were entertaining clients or conducting business at their,
Right, I can see client traffic. Let me try this test case out. I live in an accessory apartment. I have my own business. My own business is creating crafts, right? No one comes to my house. They order them through the internet, and I take them down to UPS, maybe once a day, maybe once a week.
Yeah.
Right?
That would be a home occupation, yeah.
But I mean, so what are we trying to accomplish there? Because that has absolutely zero impact.
And there's absolutely zero chance that the zoning administrator is gonna find out about it.
Know about it.
Or even if they,
Unless somebody turns the person in.
Well, so
That's
that,
how most things are, come about.
so you can always come up with an example like that paints there's no impact picture. Why would we have a regulation for that? Generally, these regulations are there to protect against not those situations, but the situation where
Traffic.
the person living in the house, has a woodworking shop in their garage. It's a permitted home occupation. They have an accessory apartment that they rent to another person who decides they'd like to open up a car repair business, doing one car at a time in the other half of the garage, and that's when you want to be able to say no. You've got one business.
The issue is traffic, right? It's the comings and goings for whatever reason, right? So you really want to prohibit accessory uses, right, that generate traffic of some type. Whether it's the UPS man or the guy dropping off his car, right, to get a new engine or whatever.
Well, what Alex suggested is there's only one home occupation per parcel, I guess, per residential piece, even if it's got an
Well, I
accessory
understand that
apartment,
argument,
you can't have
but what's
two.
our interest as a town, right? And telling somebody that they can't do crafts and send, go take them to UPS once a week.
Right.
I mean, what's our prevailing interest?
I agree with you, Joe. I think we should try and come up with some wording to allow for any business that's going to happen that won't have any negative impact.
is the only concern about like the doubling up of the business. So if I've got a house and I've got an accessory apartment and I don't know, there's a tenant that I've rented it to and they say, you know what, I'm going to run an automotive repair shop or maybe not that, but you know, something along those lines. And I said, okay, fine, I'll rent it to you. And it goes through the whole DRB process, and they look at how many vehicle trips and all that. Is that an issue? Does it matter if it's the home occupier or the tenant of the accessory use? Or is it about, to your point, vehicle traffic and kind of the root of what we're trying to resolve?
Good
You know?
question.
Well, I will tell you from experience that it's not solely about vehicle traffic. There are neighbors who have come into our office and been disgruntled about people near them that are running home occupations that involve uses of the property, aesthetic issues that they wouldn't normally have to deal with if the business wasn't located there. And I think that's part of the central tenet of zoning is to protect each other from sort of unusual, incompatible uses. And to some extent, zoning is founded on you get one principal use per lot. And then we go on to say, well, you can also have these accessory uses.
Yeah.
And we have certain stipulations on that. And I think Peter's point was be clear about or understand whether, as you allow accessory uses, which this new section is very different on, or at least more comprehensive, is it a never-ending loop? You know, can you just have accessories to accessories to accessories where a single property is doing an awful lot more than perhaps the other neighbors in the area thought should happen or had an expectation could happen?
Well, you said you and Mitch talked about this, and you thought that if this were to happen, that it wouldn't be, you know, under the current regs, it probably wouldn't be.
It would be denied,
It
yeah.
would be denied.
Yeah.
So why not just put these through as written, 5.8 as written, and see what happens? I mean,
Well,
if
Joe's playing devil's advocate. He's saying maybe we don't want to deny those accessories to the accessories. What's the town's interest? Maybe they should be allowed. I'm saying that as drafted, and our current regs, we would likely deny them. The zoning administrator would be, but this is an opportunity to do something a little different.
I mean, for the short term, I would be okay with that. Right? I think that I think that things like what I, gave as examples are happening today, right? It has not been an issue, but I think this is something we should explore as we encourage, accessory apartments more and more. This is going to happen more and more. Where the business has absolutely zero impact on neighbors or roads or anything like that. I don't think we have a prevailing interest, but we ought to take time to open that up. That's my personal opinion. Right? Can do this as it is today, right? And leave 5.8 as proposed, and put it on the list.
For a future consideration.
Yeah, that's again. I'm only one person on a 9-person board, but
There is in our current regulations, if I have it right, a statement that the principal resident, you have to have how's it go? Principal resident can have an auxiliary apartment. The owner has to live in one or the other of those structures.
Yep.
So maybe this is just, again, creating an example. I'm an owner, I live in my house, I have a small home business. I want to downsize, I'm going to move to my accessory apartment. Can I have my home business then?
Isn't that kind
So-
of what Joe said, don't you think? That's the same as what Joe's,
Well,
it's
maybe,
That's how I
it's
take
kind of
Maybe
parallel.
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's not exactly the same, but it's
similar.
it's even more convoluted because the primary owner has now decided to be in the secondary residence,
Totally.
but he wants
Which people are doing.
Right,
People do.
exactly.
I mean,
So I can put this on a list. We can take up this. We can take this up in the future. This is not an issue that is driving. We haven't experienced this issue yet, so there's no pressure to fix a problem that doesn't yet exist, even though it theoretically could exist.
Can we write in a thing that says only if John moves to his accessory apartment can he not open a business?
I don't have a home business, I don't want to have a home business, no.
It's a good
He
point.
claims
I
to
wanna
be
leave my
retired.
business when I go home. I don't wanna be at home with my business.
All right.
Okay, I got it on the list for the
All
future.
right, Shelley moved to 5.9.
Yeah,
I-
let's
That's
save
the
our
one that
discussion
you
for
got the
5.9.
most comments
Yeah.
on.
No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Joe, I have something else that's related to 5.8. There is a section 5.8.5, lots without a principal structure. And it says that the types of accessory structures noted above may be constructed on a lot without a principal structure. When you look at the list of the uses above, which is 5.8, examples of accessory structures included but are not limited to residential accessory apartments. So now I can build an accessory apartment on a lot that does not have a principal structure.
But then it becomes your principal structure, is my understanding.
That's
It
the
certainly
way.
does for us in my department of the work I do.
That's the way we've always interpreted it, John, because that happens frequently. Somebody will buy a lot in a subdivision and say, I want to have a house and an accessory apartment, but I'm going to build the garage first with the accessory apartment and live in it while I'm building the house. And our zoning administrators have always deemed that first dwelling the principal dwelling, permitted as such, and then when they come to permit the actual house, there's a condition that they flip. So I don't think this
If
is
you
gonna
have- if
I don't
we-
think this is gonna open up a new can of worms that we aren't already dealing with. Seem to be dealing with effectively in that
Okay.
sense. But you're right. This provision is largely intended for the person who has a vacant lot and wants to put a barn on it, and we don't want to tell them, no, you can't have a barn because you don't have a principal use like a house. People should be able to do that.
We do have some.
Well, if you feel it's covered so that we don't have people building a house on a lot
Yeah.
and essentially it functions as a house.
Yeah, I don't think we have that problem because it'd be permitted as a house, especially given that the accessory apartment provisions have size requirements tied to the principal dwelling. So if there isn't one, there's just no way to permit it as an accessory apartment.
And sewer and water relationships too. That one, what do we mean when we say that no accessory apartment shall be permitted in part unless it is on a on-site water and sewage disposal is available, which meets all applicable local and state regulations? Does that mean you have to connect to the already existing, or can you build a new system for septic and you can create a new well?
Yeah, the latter. You can
and-
do
and get
either.
it permitted by the state, the septic and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You just tripped into 5.9 though.
Yes, now we're in 5.9. Thank you.
Okay, we thought there'd be discussion here.
Well, I've changed my mind about half of it. I don't know about the other half. After hearing people talk about the cost to the town, putting in additional driveways, culverts, and so on, so I'm leaning toward not having the new access points, although, again, I'm not sure whether it would be possible to have this be a conditional use type scenario where if putting in a second access would have less impact on secondary resource areas.
The town's not responsible for those culverts, are they?
Yes,
I
Yeah.
don't believe it.
yes. That's Andrew. Yes, they have to maintain them.
Yeah, it's a little confusing under our road
Yeah, I wanna
standards.
know
The road foreman dictates how the culvert has to go in,
Yes.
and then once the culvert's in,
I don't think they're responsible
I'm not
for it.
100% clear, to be honest
They
with
have
you,
to work
Dennis.
around it.
But
But
but I
they're not
will tell you
responsible for it.
that regardless
Don't
of what
believe
the
it.
policy is, the road foreman is consistent that we want less, not more. That every time a road cut goes in on a public road,
No, I'm fine with that, but I
it's
just
extra
don't
work,
believe
extra
that they're
hassle, and extra
responsible.
impact to the town roads.
It's more work for them, let's put it that way. Culverts.
Yeah.
I really like what Maggie was saying, and I went around and read the other towns surrounding us, and Williston has a caveat in theirs that says that people will use the same drive unless the director of public works, which would be like Michael, I guess, in our town, or the select board, deems that the existing driveway is unsafe, which there are some of those in town that I can think of, that if somebody had an accessory apartment, it might be better if they did have a separate drive, because the existing drive is already pretty unsafe, but it's been there forever. So that was how they dealt with it in another town, which is similar to what Maggie's saying, except they didn't address sensitive areas or whatever wording you used. So I like what she's saying. But I think overall, most people said don't allow an additional drive in all the comments.
Yeah, my recollection was that was very consistent. Many
Correct.
people said that. And there was also a thread of these should be close to the house.
Absolutely.
And that was something that
Right.
the commission shied away from when these regs were written many years ago. So it seems like there might be some sentiment out there to reconsider that.
Yep.
I think allowing for a second access and not having some sort of proximity requirement. I mean, in my mind, it is allowing for fragmentation, more fragmentation.
Right,
than,
yeah.
Right.
well.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with Joe and Maggie. We need to have the proximity, and I'm not sure how we define that. Do we define that by an actual distance?
He's James, I'm Joe, but
Yeah, right, but
I turned my thinking on this as well.
so I feel differently than I did in our last meeting. I think
Well, so the
there
existing
shouldn't be-
regs say no additional access drives
No
are to be
additional-
created. So
right.
it's easy to just leave that.
Leave that.
And then if that's your sentiment, it can be modified with,
Unless.
unless whatever, what you
Right.
said for Williston or,
Yeah.
what you said is much more complicated to write, but maybe we could do it.
Sensitive area or
Sensitive
something.
areas.
We tried to write it in this proposal, but
Why
it's,
is that use the same language from the rural residential?
well, we did that in this proposal, so it's possible. But I think the other question that I'd like to hear you guys speak to is this sentiment that you heard at the meeting about proximity. And like John said, how do you do that? Do you want to do that, and how do you do that? Clearly, just a linear measurement from the existing house is the easiest thing
Yeah,
to
put a
administer.
thing in
Yeah,
a
we just
circle.
tell people you got to be within 500 feet or 700 feet or whatever.
My reasoning is traditionally, it seems, historically, people have thought of this as the mother-in-law's apartment. Somebody close to the family, somebody involved in the family, maybe not the mother-in-law, but a cousin or, So I feel that it is what we were trying to allow, not being able to put a house at the other end of your property and even create a long drive to it, so that you had another essentially rental property.
So-
That wasn't the intention.
I agree with
at
you
all.
on the second front, both from the state level and what the statute says and our regs. This mother-in-law concept is an artifact of the past. These are designed to be rental properties. Many people do still use them for family members, but the reason that the state requires us to allow them is largely for affordable housing.
It's
because they
affordable
tend to
housing and
be
it's-
Right.
they tend to
Yeah.
be that. So
It's
it's not
infill,
about
it's-
blood
yeah.
relatives or even though oftentimes it's used that way. And in the past, that was referred to that
Right,
way.
that was historic.
But I agree with you. I don't think there wasn't a real intent for these things to be far flung away from the house.
So I would say keep the one cut, and I think by having the one cut, it helps you
Yes.
maintain the
Exactly.
proximity.
Yes.
So if somebody wants to go put one way over on the other side of my property, and they have one road cut, and they have to run a driveway all that way, I think most would agree, we don't really want a bunch of long driveway across the property, but that's an expense, and you start talking about the 10,000 square feet of impervious surface, and you're gonna have to go through all these other, that
Yeah,
gets
there are
expensive
other
to do, which
Some
will make it
constraints.
come in. And two, I think it pushes them that if they do wanna do that, then you start getting into the subdivision, you're saying, you know what, I have to parcel this out, it can then have a road cut and a house and an address and a tax property, and it's still your rental property, but it is a separate thing. Now, that's just how I look at it. I've always seen this, I'm gonna have the second road cut and I'm gonna put it over there. It's just a to get around subdivision.
Right, me too.
And it's
Yeah.
just so they can do it without having to go through that. And I
Yeah.
don't think that's where we wanna go.
No.
And I think just the cost limitations of running a huge driveway is going to keep them by itself closer to the house without having to say you must be within so many feet. I mean, everybody's property is
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
everybody's land
No,
terrain's
it's hard.
different. So I don't wanna get too descriptive from that, but I think it will help organically keep it closer.
I think just from the administration standpoint, I think you could put a number on it, a distance measurement. If you want to be more flexible, you could have that distance measure not be from just the house, but be from the existing driveway and keep it a small number. So that, for example, if somebody has a house, our former buildings and facilities director, Rocky Martin, has this situation, has a house at the end of a very long driveway, and they own 45 acres, and what they did was create a barn with an accessory apartment in it. I don't know, maybe 400 feet away from the house, but it was right on the driveway. They didn't put in a new driveway. They just plunked a building along the existing driveway on the way to the house. And you might look at it and say, well, it's kind of far away from the house, but its impact was small because it was right on the existing driveway. So you could potentially say accessory apartments have to be within 100 feet or 50 feet of the house and or the existing driveway with no additional access drives created, and that would keep it tight with a real number. And it would prevent that situation of somebody saying, well, fine, I won't put in a new road cut, but I'm going to build an extra
Build a-
spur off my driveway for 600 feet.
I kind of like that solution.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all. I don't think you should tell people. Because I think if you share the driveway, I think that it so far has taken care of it. I've been to about every one in town, including Rockies, and I think that there's not a problem that he's so far away. And if you did that, he wouldn't be able to do it there.
No, she,
Well, no, he would.
No, he
He
would.
would because
From the
he would.
Oh, you're talking about distance from the driveway,
Yeah,
not the
driveway
house.
or the
Right,
house,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry.
But you're right, Marie, and you do have a lot of expertise on this because you have been to all these properties. Most people do it
It's totally
right
fine.
near the house. They do it
Yeah.
above the garage. They do it in a little studio. They do it up in their barn.
Right.
But there are some circumstances like Rocky's where
Right,
it's,
his is a
it's-
little different, and I can
far
think
away.
of another one on Leavenworth Road that's a really old one, and it's at the beginning of their driveway, and then
And
it's
the
quite
house is
a ways
at-
to the house, but it's at the beginning, and it totally, I think, fits. But it's close to the driveway, not close to the residence.
Now, if you say close to the driveway, can I just build a very long 600-foot driveway and say, I'm 2 feet off the driveway? It just happens to be a 600-foot new extension. I just-
Oh, no, the existing driveway.
We'd say the existing driveway, yeah,
driveway.
or the driveway to the
Yeah.
to the principal dwelling, something
Yeah.
like that.
So, I think this is another one of those that we haven't had many problems with yet. And, you know, if we start, we can always go back and relook at it.
I mean, the one thing that Alex's proposal does do is ensure that we're not breaking up rural landscape.
Correct,
We're not
absolutely.
segmenting,
Yeah,
we're keeping it close to,
correct, yeah.
infrastructure.
And trust me, driveways are very expensive to build now.
Yeah.
And septic systems are very expensive. And people are controlled somewhat by the cost. A lot of people are, in this town, I think.
Is there any land in town where there's more than one access point?
Yes.
Yeah,
Really old
there
ones.
there are properties that have multiple access points.
And one of them I know of has been a problem for the neighbors. It's on the lake. It's old though, you know, it's been around for a long time. I've heard some complaints. So that's another reason why I think having the same, only one drive is the best scenario.
Okay, I think the board's pretty much in agreement on that part.
Yeah.
And then distance from the existing driveway, how do people feel about that?
I don't like it, but
Don't like what?
having to be only 100 feet from the
Right.
driveway or whatever.
Oh,
Why? What about it is?
I have 40 acres of land,
Mhm.
and I could build an accessory apartment off my driveway. Would it be more than 100 feet away? And I could plunk it where no one would even ever see it, you know, neighbors or anything.
100 feet away from your existing driveway.
I mean, I don't like that number.
I'd rather not see a number also.
Well, then we ought to just go with a single, if everybody feels that way, we ought to just go with a single road cut.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
think
what
we
the
need to
which is what the
really look
current
into the
rule
other
is.
part.
So
Right.
just be reverting to what the current language is.
So keep it as it is and come back to it to discuss the
Proximity
so.
issue.
proximity of the driveway.
There was one comment from via email that did question, or at least had concerns about the size
Right.
increase as well. This was Mr. Anderson, Richard. I don't know him, but it sounded like he was more concerned about the proximity issue and the de facto subdivision and that sort of thing. I'm not sure he was fully concerned about the size, but he did mention it.
And then the person above it was in favor of the size.
Right. So I don't know if you just wanted to do a check-in, because remember, it was the size that was the initial impetus for this change. It wasn't the access at all.
Right.
It was just, hey, let's allow larger
Ah.
accessory apartments. And,
Right.
and Ralph, you know, did that research and suggested the 1,200 square feet. But if you're all still good with that, I just wanted to make sure it was on the table.
I'm okay with
I'm
our
good with
sizing calculation we came up with.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
it's
okay
fair.
fine with the
with the
size.
size.
It's with the state, so.
So are we putting in something about proximity, or we're kicking that can down the road?
No.
It sounds like kick that can down the road. Just reinstate the no additional access drive provision and leave it at that.
All right, so I've just been strumming through here, and I know we've been at this about an hour. We got two more things that hopefully would be quicker, or maybe just one more thing. Actually, no, two more things that would take us to the end of zoning and leave us at subdivision. That might be a nice break point.
Okay.
Don't forget your audience, though. Some of them may be here to talk to you about these housekeeping changes versus your next agenda item. You want to give them a chance to speak up.
So I'll ask the question, is anybody here for housekeeping changes? Okay, anything in particular?
Now, I want to make sure you move forward with the larger accessory apartments, and I couldn't give a rip about a curb cut.
All right. Well, we've been there.
Covered.
Done?
Appreciate
Is it Jean?
it. Jean's my wife, I'm the other half.
The other half, okay. Sorry, what was your name?
Brianna.
Brianna. Thanks, Brianna.
All right, do we want to quickly talk about 518.5?
Could I just ask one question on that? The 12, so it's 1,200 square feet is what you're limiting it to?
It's a little more nuanced than that, but
Okay.
that's it. It depends on the size of the house.
Okay, that's what I was saying, is there should be some relationship.
Yeah.
between-
Yeah, so for smaller homes, it's actually, it can't be any more than 75%
Yeah,
of the
okay,
home. For medium-sized homes, it's the 1,200, and for the really big homes, it's what the state requirement is, which is 30%
Yep.
size of the home.
All right, 518.5, temporary structures. So I think some of the We got some mixed commentary here, right? Some in favor, some opposed. Anybody have thoughts?
I still support our changes.
Okay, I as well still support these changes.
So
Not
do I.
surprisingly, since we made them.
Well,
You changed your
Yes.
mind on other ones, so.
we also made the decision about multiple road cuts, and
Right.
we saw the error of our ways. And
What if we adjusted it a little bit to address Jesse Paul's comment?
About to take it down and
Well-
put it back up to reset the clock.
We could word it that if it's up for 6 months out of any year,
Yeah,
you would need a permit instead of.
that's what I had thought of
Yeah.
also,
That's good.
a period during a year.
okay, I like that thought.
We still rely on kind of personal reporting, neighborhood reporting, and we have to wait 6 months to see whether this temporary structure is gonna be gone or not. It could stay there for 5 and 7 months or whatever, and wouldn't require a permit.
I mean, the point's valid,
All
but
of
it's
that is-
kind of consistent with 99.99% of zoning.
I did check on what Peter's question was, and I think I misspoke at the meeting. I think he's right that even these temporary structures still need to meet setbacks. Even though they don't require a
Yeah,
building
absolutely.
permit, they still need to meet setbacks. So if a neighbor complained not about how long it had been there without a permit, but
But
rather
that it
it's
was
right on my
right on my
property
line.
line, I can't, see past my driveway, then the zoning administrator could take enforcement action on that, regardless of the fact that it was a temporary structure.
There's also 100 square foot, if the structure is 100 square foot or less.
That
Then-
sounds like a building permit.
Then it requires if it's
it's
less than
mo-
that, it does not require a permit.
it's
If it's
more
more,
than
it
that,
does.
it does.
But regardless, it still needs to meet setbacks.
Right. And how many of these garages, temporary
The
garages?
canopy tent
right,
garages, yeah.
Are 100, less than 100 or less. You can't get a,
Not very
You know,
many. Most
that's-
of them are larger than
yeah,
that.
they're bigger than that if you want to get out of the car once you drive in. you know,
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay, so we're good on these?
I would think we're good on 518.
518.5,
Just with
And-
James's suggested change.
yeah.
Okay.
And then there was just one more, it looked like, under zoning, and that was,
529.
529. And, I certainly don't wanna undo, a subdivision or site plan approval that someone is not upholding, with a regulation change.
I think it'd be fairly easy to tweak this language to specify that. So, if you're amenable to Missy's suggestion, I can make that happen.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think this area is quite an improvement over what we had before.
Yeah, the only thing that I've had second thoughts about, and I discussed these with Missy too, but she didn't raise them at the hearing, so I don't want to speak for her. She just made me think about them. Is just take a second look at the exempt lights under this provision. So like flag lights are exempt and some others. The one that caught my eye, and I wrote it, so you'd think I would have thought through it, but it just on second look, it basically exempts up to 4 lights that are under a certain brightness per residential dwelling, with the idea being somebody's house, they want to have a couple sconce lights on the front door and maybe, you know, a light over the garage. And if they're not bright or they're not overly bright, they don't have to comply with these regulations. So they don't have to be downcast and shielded. They can be decorative and light can be spilling out and that sort of thing. So just think about whether 4 is the right number. I know when I was initially drafting, I was going back and forth between maybe 1 or 2, and anyway. You don't have to decide that tonight, because obviously you're not going to finish this tonight, but just think on it a little bit.
All right, so I think we're done with zoning. Does anyone on the board have a problem with stopping the conversation on housekeeping here?
That's a good spot.
And leave subdivision regulation changes later for another meeting.
Yeah, I think we would continue that probably for the next meeting.
Okay.
So, which leaves us at agenda item number 4, which is size limit for retail establishments. So, talk about what the existing size limits are in the different zones. Think about where the town plan leaves us. And probably from there, start a discussion. We can review the discussion points we've been through before as far back as 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a single section in the regs. It's in the village zoning district. The section referenced on the agenda, 3.5.6, number 2, which calls out a maximum size for retail establishments of 20,000 square feet. The Village North zoning district, Village Northwest, I should say, just mirrors the Village District zoning allowances, so that retail size cap also applies to the Village Northwest. The Village Northeast district, where NRG is located, doesn't even allow retail uses, so there's no size cap there because the retail uses aren't even allowed. And that leaves us with the commercial district, which is the only other district where a principal retail use would be allowed. And there isn't a size cap on retail in that district. And that district is the area around, in Commerce, off of Commerce Street, as well as the area on Ballard's Corner Road, up by the library. Those are our 2 commercial districts. They have the same zoning, each of them.
I thought that was industrial district 2 or something.
No, our
When
industrial.
Tech used.
No, there's the industrial districts that we have. We have 4 of them. There's the big one where Hinesburg Sand and Gravel is down by your where you
That's
live, Marie.
one, isn't it?
That's one. Iroquois Manufacturing has another. That's 2, and then 3 and 4 are. Why are they slipping through my brain? The cheese plant and the Giroux Auto Body Shop are those 2. So, yeah. So there is no industrial district over by Nestec. It's all part of the commercial district.
Okay.
And then again, that area up by Ballard's Corner is a commercial district as well, but with the same zoning. And so I put this in your packet email, but also on that Front Porch Forum post. You know, the history of it is that, you know, in the beginning, there was not a village district. There was a commercial district and a bunch of other ag, rural, conservation, and there was no size cap on retail. When the village district was created, it was created with a size cap. That was actually substantially smaller than 20,000. It was 10. And then as the zoning changed over time, that was bumped up to 20, and it's been that way ever since. But all through that, the commercial district has remained without that cap. So that's the history of it. You've had Jeff and current planning commissioner, a former planning commissioner, suggesting that it would be a good idea to extend that 20,000 square foot cap to the commercial district. You got a letter from a group of citizens who asked for the same change. And then you have this discussion from back in 2011 where the same change was discussed then and tabled. And then you have language in the town plan that says something a little different about maybe modifying that or even increasing that cap in the village area for grocery stores in particular, such that one could locate in somewhere other, one that was large could locate somewhere other than the commercial district.
And we also did get some additional emails today, Alex, basically wanting to be part of the conversation, but not necessarily gonna be here tonight.
You mean the ones from the Economic Development Committee representatives,
So
Wayne
there were the
Masika
Frosts,
and Andrew Frost?
and Amy Frost.
Yeah.
And then
They
there was one
didn't
other.
make suggestions. They were more questions about what does
Right.
this mean? What's the impact on Hinesburg's economy or other communities that have such caps?
Oh, and so where do we stand on the Lot 15 issues?
The Hannaford Project. So Hannaford was proposed as a 36,000 square
Right.
foot retail establishment. So that project at that size would not be possible
Right.
in any other zoning district because of the retail cap.
Right. But where does that issue stand at
Where
the
does the
present time?
project stand? It's
The court.
yeah, it's in limbo.
It's in limbo,
So
right?
the town's approval was overturned. So Hannaford, should they want to continue, which they do, they've expressed that, will have to come back and go before the DRB and go through the site plan process all over again. And from the state permitting standpoint, it didn't, their de facto approvals for Act 250 did not get overturned, but they got remanded back to the lower court to haggle over a variety of issues, stormwater, traffic, and the like.
So I wonder where we stand on a legal issue, changing it in the, at this point.
Yeah, my
I'm wondering if
understanding
we
is
have
they
any-
they are not vested in our regulations at this point, so their application is done. So if
They're starting a new
they
then.
will start from scratch, and they will, whenever they submit an application, it'll be that set of regulations that they get reviewed under. So right now, if they were to reapply, we don't have a cap in the commercial district, so they could still make that application, go through the process. The zoning did change a little bit since they first applied, and whatever those changes were, our stormwater regs actually, for example, are different. They would have to comply with.
Right.
If we made the change that some folks have suggested to bring that cap to the commercial district, it would depend on when we made that change in relation to when they made their new application.
So I can give you my reasoning why I brought it forward. So I put it forward to everybody just so people hear to say we should carry that 20,000 square foot cap throughout the commercial district in town. I just want to be clear, it's not an anti-project or not wanting certain corporate whatever coming in. That's not it. I'll say it. If Hannaford wants to come here, I'd love to have them. My take on it is keeping the size and look and feel of the village in the right size and look and feel of the village. Personally, I don't want to see us go the way of large retail establishment, big box stores. That is completely counter to what we've got is what we want for a village. As far as the economic impacts and looking at the comments that were made back in 2011, if you look at the history of where retail's gone since then, many of the big box store providers, and I'm talking the Walmarts and the Targets and the very large stores, have realized that's not a good business model anymore because it's been so oversaturated. In fact, they're looking at doing stores that are 20,000 square feet and below. So you've got the Walmart neighborhood markets, you've got these things called Targets Go, which are very small footprint comparatively. 20,000 is not, in my mind, a small footprint, but compared to 30, 50, 100,000, it is. So I think the economic standards of where the retail establishment is going today fits that model. And I don't think we're pushing anybody out by saying we want our village to stay this way. I just think it makes sense because that's the size limit that we're saying we want throughout the rest of the village. That's the higher end of the sizes that are in that commerce district. I think it's like 22, 21 or some of the bigger ones in that area. And I just think it makes sense to keep it right-sized with the rest of the town. And again, it goes to walkability, livability, pedestrian access. I think if you put a large retail establishment in there, you're going to increase traffic. You're going to increase motor people through what's right next to residential neighborhoods. And I think it's going to cause more issues than fix. I think if you limit it to the right size, it just fits with what we're trying to accomplish. So as I'm saying, I'm not trying to stop commercial activity. I'm not trying to stop the expansion of stores. I'm just saying I want to look for a village that goes for our goal, because I think if we do that, and that's what people, not besides the economics of it with business standpoints, I think where people want to live today fit that mold. And rather than looking at how it used to be back in the 90s, and we start looking at where things are going in terms of e-commerce and smaller retail establishments, they're saying the vast majority of retail establishments that do well are under 10,000 square feet. They're not the huge mega centers. So, because most of the stores are that way. And I just think it creates that, and that's going to help people want to move to Hinesburg and will help us grow in the way we want it to grow, which helps taxes here, helps drive up property values, and helps do that cause and demand. And I think if we open up, build your giant box store, one, I think in 5, 10 years, 20 years, they're going to fail and you're going to be stuck, like South Burlington with a big Kmart. It's just sitting there. And I just think get in front of it, say this is what we want, this is how it is. And I think you'll find, maybe it won't be Hannaford, but I think you will find retailers, even national brand retailers, that will say, you know what, I can make that model work.
Well, do you think the smaller building will make the traffic any different?
Right, that's what I was
I wouldn't think that would change.
gonna, right.
I think it will go to being a store that is meant for the Hinesburg in this community and not seen as a retail establishment that's meant to serve all points south.
So Alex, I don't know if you'd know this or not. There's a grocery store that was built in Underhill Flats.
Yeah,
How big is that store?
I don't know the size. That's a good question. It's definitely, an independent market kind of a store, not unlike a Lampman's. It's the same owner who built the new Richmond
They all
market.
just sold.
Yeah, they were just in the paper
to
today
a
that they
big
sold
company.
to a company out of Maine or
And I
New
wondered the
Hampshire.
same question.
But I can
what
find
size they
I can
were.
find that out. I can tell you that the Richmond market, I actually don't know the size of it, but I think it's in the 12,000 square
Is it?
foot. And what the rumors that I heard was that they wish they had built it bigger. You know, it was such a success that they'd like to have it larger than it actually is. The Jericho Underhill Flats one, I think, just by driving past it, is bigger. It looks like a far larger building,
Looks taller.
but it's hard to know what the actual footprint is without checking with their assessor. So I can check on that, but I don't know right tonight. I know from that 2011 minutes, you saw what Lampman's is.
Yep. Yeah, I'm staring at.
And Shelburne Market, I could get those numbers, for Shelburne
one
Market,
sold, too.
Richmond, Jericho. Maybe the one in Bristol is not a independent one. Is that a
Shaw's.
Shaw's?
Yeah.
But I could get those numbers if you want to see what they are.
Really?
You're talking about the 5 stores that are owned by the same.
Well,
man
several
that-
of those.
So-
I don't think the one in Bristol is owned by that couple,
No,
but
but there were 5
yeah.
that
Right,
he did own,
correct.
Yep.
does own, is selling.
3 of
so
which
forth.
are right around here.
So the only lot really out there is lot 15 that you could build bigger than 20,000 square feet, right? Because my understanding is the other lot
Well,
isn't big enough.
No. Remember, development is not just on green space. Redevelopment of parcels
True,
is also
true.
possible. So
Yeah,
think of
okay.
Firehouse Plaza. Maybe someday someone will buy that and say, that's
change
such
it."
valuable real estate. We're going to knock down what's there and build
Okay.
something new. But yes, in terms of easy and
Mm-hmm.
undeveloped, it is that one lot. The other undeveloped lots in the commercial district are too small to
Right,
support
that's the one
a
that's
structure
still
that big.
empty, that's owned by Dark Star.
Yeah, there's one owned by
It's not
Darkstar
developed.
that's right next to them that they could sell and build on, but I don't think it's large enough to support a building
No, I
of
don't
20,000
either.
plus.
Right.
And there's one between the dentist office and the bank,
Yes, but
Merchants
that's
Bank.
really
that,
limited.
it's too small to support a building of more than 20,000.
You could accumulate lots in along Commerce
That's true, too.
Drive,
Yep.
someone
So let
could
me-
buy
True.
several.
That's true.
Alex, let me
That's
test
true.
that assumption. Granted, space-wise, right, you can't fit a single-story, huge building on those lots. If one wanted a retail establishment at greater than 20,000 square feet and was willing to do it
They could
in
go up.
multiple stories, they can go up, and there are examples of that, in the local area. Superstore in Williston, it's a multi-floor store.
Yeah, downtown
you know,
Homeport is another
So,
example.
so in thinking about regulations like this, we often think in terms of intended consequences, right? I think we ought to be thinking about unintended consequences as well. What would we, if we're going to change this, what would we want? What's in the town's interest? And for me, right, I think one of the problems with land use, it's something that we tried to address in the Village Northwest and Village Northeast is really don't encourage single story stuff. I think that from a commercial area, from any mixed use area, I think efficient land use dictates that you go up. You have some verticality to this in order to get less impact on the land.
And do we allow that, Joe, in our present regulations to go up?
I would have to look.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In the,
Oh, yeah.
We
Oh,
do?
you can-
Yep. Yeah, although I will tell you that it's,
I didn't know.
as much as there are some examples of a retail establishment with multiple stories, there aren't many.
There aren't many, but I think there are local examples that say it's workable. I've certainly been in other places that have had multi-floor retail, single establishment, not multiple establishment.
Right.
Single establishment, multi-floor. In fact, in downtown Vancouver, BC, there's even a grocery store like that I've been in. Right.
There's a grocery store in Burlington like that.
So I guess what I'd ask in this conversation is if 40,000 square feet or thereabouts doesn't work for us in terms of look and feel for the community, is that because a 40,000 square foot building, no matter how it's built, is too big? In which case we have some other problems because we're more than happy to see NRG at greater than 40,000 square feet. Right? Or is it the fact that it's a single floor sort of thing, or are there other reasons?
So one of mine, when I was thinking about this, one of the things was actually saying 20,000 square foot with a maximum 10,000 square foot footprint.
With a maximum,
10,000 square foot footprint. So if you're doing 2 stories, you got a 10,000 square foot building with two levels. It's 20,000 square feet of heated space, if you will. I get what you're saying about NRG. I think that's 72,000 square feet or thereabout. It's a different district. It's not about retail. It's about office. I still think we should discuss that area and what does that look like, and that gets into the conversations we had about village design standards and what type of buildings do we want to see. But I think for that commerce area in the middle of the town, based on the buildings that are there, to go larger than that, I think it's just, I don't think it's where we want to go. I think it's going to be out of character, and it's just anti to where we're trying to go in the village, in the village vision of the growth area. And I say that not only because, yes, I want economics and I want retail, but like I said, I've got articles here about, price per square foot of retail. 95% of it are under 10,000. You're gonna get the most bang for your retail buck. But it's also about the residential areas and the livability and the values of homes that are down in this area and what's going on. And I think you have to take all of that into account, not just I want to open this up for a business to do whatever they want. It's bigger than that. So I really think that's the limit, 20,000 square feet. That's like Nestec, I think it's a little bit bigger than that.
But it's not a retail space. I think it's really important
Yeah.
that you differentiate between these light industrial buildings and uses and the retail. I think, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the largest retail establishment we have in town is Kinney Drugs, which is just over 11,000 square feet. So for me anyways, this is your conversation, not mine, but it's hard for me to imagine a 20,000 square foot retail establishment that is not a grocery store. Like, what retail establishment could sell that much merchandise
Target.
in Hinesburg? Dollar stores don't. They come in at usually 9,000 square feet, to 10. Kinney Drugs came in as what we thought then was a big box store, and that's just 11,000 square feet. So, from a retail standpoint, a 20,000 square foot store is large for a community the size of Hinesburg or any of the outer ring communities in Chittenden County, whether it's Richmond or Jericho or Underhill.
What's the shopping center, Alex? Do you know? I don't know.
Firehouse Plaza.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
not
in those
quite
2011
20.
minutes.
Not quite
It's like
20.
19,000,
Yeah,
but it's not
19
one retail establishment.
No, I know, I
It's
understand.
broken up, and so each of them sort of have a much smaller footprint and scale. Even though Aubuchon's done a lot of expansion,
But
I bet you they're smaller. I'm sure they're smaller than Kinney Drugs is.
just listening to what Jeff said though, but for instance, say somebody came in that went up for sale, somebody bought it and tore it down.
Yep.
Tore it down, which happens quite often. It's happening in Burlington. And wanted to go up there, like what Joe said. Just putting everybody's ideas together in one lot.
Yeah.
Well, we've already got that across the street where we have retail on the bottom.
Right.
The,
Residential upstairs.
Yeah, with the residential upstairs. Again, we've zoned the village more densely
Right.
to encourage more affordable housing, so I'm in favor of that.
I think we have some questions or
No, I
comments.
just wanted to say the Jericho market's 18,000 square feet.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks, Marilee.
And if you wanted some other comparisons, the new city market on Flint Avenue is 14,000 square feet of retail on that first floor.
One floor.
And the city market in downtown is 12,000.
And is the Jericho Market just one story or two? The picture I saw in the paper today, it looked tall.
It did, yeah.
So
don't know.
you don't
They
know.
have, I mean, those other grocery stores all have additional office and
Kinda like-
potentially storage space on the
Like
second floor.
Lampman's has a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not concerned at all about discouraging retail. I don't think this is, our cap has discouraged or will discourage retail. Every time this conversation has come up and the discussions we had, 10 years ago, input was pretty overwhelming against big box stores
Absolutely.
from all sides. And it has just never made sense to me that we put this retail cap in the village where we don't want any big box stores, and yet we leave this, large chunk right in the center of the village with no cap. What's the point in having a cap if we don't, if it doesn't apply to the center of the village?
I
don't think any of us were around. I'm the old guy, and I wasn't
You were.
around when the commercial district was formed,
Yeah.
No.
right? But
we
I
were in
think
2000.
I think they formed it with a different intent than the village.
It was really a very separate and distinct area where residential use was not allowed. And this concept of mixed use development, I don't think was in vogue. It was keep these uses apart from each other. Don't let residences have to be next to businesses that make noise and have lights and traffic and that sort of thing. And remember too that the commercial district, as it stands today, used to be on the north side of what was the historic village core. Still is on the north side of the historic village core, but the village has expanded sort of up to it and around it. And so I think that when these caps were initiated, Hinesburg looked different, you know, and that commercial district felt like a different place where it would be okay for different things to happen. And your vision, I think the community's vision has changed an awful lot. You know, I hear a lot of you talk about wanting to get these districts more integrated. And so that it might make a lot more sense now to try to blend these requirements and not have these things be outliers, you know, like you're saying, Maggie.
Is residential, is that allowed now in Commerce Park, or is that
Yeah.
still a?
Yes.
It is, but only on the second or third story of buildings.
That's good.
There is a living
Above
unit
nest
above
deck.
nest deck. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the people that own it live up there now.
And I'd love to see that whole Commerce Street area get more residential.
Right,
It's-
yeah, that would be nice.
People on
it's
the
nice, but it's
sidewalks,
rather
people
bleak.
moving
You
around.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
would be nice to see more
Yeah.
people live there. And
I
more-
know with that lot 15 originally, my recollection is that NRG was going to go there. They started there and they did borings and it wouldn't support the building that they wanted to build, which I probably wasn't as big as what they ended up building. It evolved over time, but it wouldn't support it.
Yeah, but I think, you know, the energy building is it looks like an office building from the front. Once you walk in the door and realize that the offices are really that sliver at the front, and there's a very large manufacturing
Right,
area behind it with heavy, you know, needing the heavy foundations
right.
versus the type of uses, you know, be it office space, commercial, you know, residential, you know, which are much lighter in
Balloon
nature.
factory.
I what factory?
Balloon factory.
Balloon factory. Very light.
They're very light, yeah.
Yeah.
I would, you know, if we go back 8 years.
Bob, just tell us who you are.
About people. Many of us were urging Hannaford, because it was Hannaford. It could have been anybody, but it was Hannaford. We were urging them, and we would have worked with them. I can't speak for everybody, but I would have been on board with Hannaford had they agreed to a smaller footprint. And we urged them time and time again to do that, and they absolutely refused. We're still trying to figure out why they absolutely need that 36,000 square foot store there. It's probably because it's a point store from easy delivery for one truck coming for all the stores, you know. It's their business plan, but it's not necessarily what we would want in the town, or many of us would want. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Jeff is saying. And just one other thing, this may be the time to do that. We have an opportunity to do that now, to do this now in the commercial district. And we wouldn't necessarily, I don't think we would suffer legal consequences for that, because Hannaford is in a hiatus now, and they do have to come back, as Alex was saying, and resubmit. So it may be, this may be a small window for Hinesburg to really step up and make this happen. So I just want to say that.
But and I think that's a good point you're making, Bob, but honestly, I think we don't know legally where we stand on this. I certainly would love to have an opinion from League of Cities and Towns or something, if this were enacted. Because I don't think the town of Hinesburg needs any more lawsuits.
I think
That's
practically
concerns me.
it's not going to be an issue, because unless the select board opts to enact
right.
interim zoning immediately, Hannaford will be back in front of us with an application in a matter of weeks.
Right.
This kind of a zoning change takes months. And it doesn't become effective until the planning commission forwards it to the select board. The select board warns a public hearing on it, and then it kicks in. So I'd be shocked, Bob, if anything we did could get in the way of them submitting another application. They're aware of the fact that they have to come back to the town, and and they can submit an application at any moment. And I'm sure they will become aware of this discussion that we're having, and they're not going to ignore the potential for, an initiative that would undermine the project, which, that would. So regardless of the legal impacts, I have a
Thank you.
feeling that they're gonna
Good.
get their foot in the door, sooner rather than later.
Well, that shouldn't have any impact on what we do around this.
Right.
Yeah, it's a larger planning issue that you're
Yeah.
talking about. This is one particular project and, yeah. But I will say that no, I won't say anything. I think there's more people out there that wanna say stuff, right?
Looks like Bill, you have.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, the microphone. I'm supposed to be passing the microphone.
Bill doesn't need one.
Bill Marks, I gather this is public question, comment time now. After I was hearing about some of the square footage, I had thought Kinney's was 20,000, and I'm realizing that 20,000 is a lot bigger than I thought, and wondering if we really should be talking about less than 20,000, maybe 15,000. I've been to the new city market, that's huge, and that includes a cafe and so forth, and I think Andrea or someone said that was only 14,000. And they have a lot of parking to go along with that. So that's one thing I'd like Planning Commission to consider, and I might disagree about not being able to do anything. Traditionally, the kind of thing we've been sort of contemplating, I think Alex's point was sort of answered my question, which I really knew the answer, that to take formal action yourselves would, as far as making it more difficult for someone to put a 40,000 square foot building across the street, would be too late. But perhaps if the Planning Commission is majority, it sounds like it is, inclined to try to prevent that, perhaps a letter to the select board strongly urging them to do some interim zoning. I think if there's anything that might be appropriate in terms of the future of this community, this is as big of an issue we've faced in my memory. So that's my suggestion.
Maybe you could just pass the mic. Joe, are you just gonna allow the mic
Sure.
to freely? Okay,
Why
good.
not? For a little bit, it's not gonna be, right, open-ended.
Yeah, Mary Beth Bowman, I too agree. Do what you can tonight, send it to the select board, and let's get this process going. Let's start it, if we can get it tonight, it's get it done now to get to the next stage. So that's what I'm hoping we can do.
So can we make a motion on this, and with part of it being to send it to the select board?
I would.
Because that's where the
I would,
conversation would be, correct?
That's what the board's here to decide,
Right.
right? Now, don't take what I'm gonna say wrong, right?
But I will.
Well, that's fine, but, we're 9 or we're really 8 people around the table tonight, right? Charged with the town's best interest, right? We have a, very interested citizenry out here who has fought a very long battle, right, to get something done or not done with this land, right? If we're to do it tonight, right, what we have to believe and answer for ourselves is that this is the right thing, for the town, right? I really fear weaponizing this board, right? If we're doing it simply for a desired outcome, right? That's one thing. if we're really looking at the commercial area as a whole, right, and trying to set policy for how we want that to change, I think that's a very different question. So I need the board to think about, not only step 1, but step 2 and step 3 as we go forward here.
Well, and Jeff, just for the procedural side of things, you understand how zoning changes percolate up, right? The housekeeping changes is what you
Yes.
started the meeting with. So you discuss things, you get feedback, you come up with a proposal, you warn a formal public hearing, you get comments, you consider them, you make revisions, then you forward it to the select board. If this change to extending the retail cap to the commercial district is something you'd like to pursue, that's the normal process you go through. So you're having the first discussion now. If you all said, let's do it, then you'd instruct me to warn a public hearing and, make sure we had draft language that was good and you'd get that going. If you want it to happen much faster than that process, then interim zoning is the only option on that. And that's an emergency measure as described in statute when you are, undertaking research or updating things and something needs to happen faster. So I think you have sort of two options. You can either pursue this idea and go through the normal process, which is lengthy and deliberative and involves, a formal public hearing, which you haven't had yet. Or you can say, we're in an emergency situation and we recommend the select board take this emergency step through an interim zoning, and then it's going to be in their lap. So those are the procedural ways forward.
One doesn't rule out the other, though, Alex.
No, you could do both. Yeah.
So I'll let us discuss that as a board and what we want to do. If I had my druthers, I would do the interim zoning. I think we talked about it. I think we've suggested it to the planning commission, and I think it's been twice, and twice we were told no. So I don't know if going for a third time to club a dead horse, for lack of, you know what I mean?
Well, those
is really-
suggestions were not specific to this change. Those
Right.
suggestions were a development moratorium, basically, and the select board
Yeah.
said no to that.
Right.
This is a very targeted, very
And there were-
specific change.
Right, in that case, there was what we thought was a $10 million bill, right, facing the town for septic,
So,
right,
okay.
that we had to get our arms around.
So, yeah, I'll let you finish, sorry.
I'm done.
Oh, so for me, I've been involved, with the town for 5 years, 6 years in various roles. And I've been adamant about the look and the feel and the want of the village growth area and how it's to be since day one, right? And I was there when all the Hannaford stuff was going on. And I made the same arguments then that I say now. I raised most stores want to be 15,000 square feet, whatever. 20,000 square feet seems to be the size in that area at the maximum build out, so that's okay. But again, I'm going to say the same thing that I've said a couple meetings ago. That's the vision that I think this town needs to go in, is keep it small, keep it a livable, walkable city. It's going to help the residents that live in the village, the housing prices, and for the whole town. So for me personally, yeah, I don't have a problem saying interim zoning, we're looking at a 20,000 square feet just to extend the normal throughout our village area as per we wanted. So I would recommend doing that and saying you can call it a change, whatever, but in my eyes, it's just basically normalizing what's already there throughout the village core. And I would say let's go through the normal process, but in light of all the things that are going on, my fear is for me, right? Everybody's got to say, for me, that's the way we want this town to grow. And if we get a bigger store plopped right in the middle of that, it's going to cause a lot of disruption to how we plan and grow and go from that. And my fear is the minute a shovel goes in the ground, you can't undo it. You're not. So if we want to do that and we want to protect our vision and the things that we've been working on for many, many years, we should take that step and propose an interim zoning for this and that area, talking about the 20,000 square foot approval. I know we need the public hearings here in the normal process, but I'm fine having those public hearings at the select board level, if that's possible, and taking that route. That's my recommendation, and that's what I'm recommending. But there's many other people, and I hear what you're saying about, quote, weaponizing, and I don't see it as weaponizing. I see it as that vision of the core has been there
Right.
for quite a while,
well,
and it's
right.
more of a
So-
loophole we're closing.
So to clarify a little bit, right? So, if we took the step of interim zoning, right, what this board is basically committing itself to is a very in-depth, process, which is going to take some place, the place of some other things this board was going to do to try and figure out, how they want the next stage of that commercial zone to look. Not only the one lot, but how to encourage development and redevelopment, right, to get something that is perhaps more forward-looking and more in line with some of the things that we've tried to encourage in the Village Northwest. More verticality, I mentioned that before. More mixed use, more reuse, right? So that buildings are more reusable. All of that takes time. Like I said, it's going to displace other things that we decided we were going to do, because there's once you click that button, there's a very limited time frame, right, that you have to make this work.
Right, but if we're saying we're looking for the growth patterns, and I'll call it the design of what we said, tighter, more compact, having residential over commercial, those type of things. And how I'm seeing is we've had much of that regulation there. It's just applying it to the whole of the village growth area. So I don't think it would take, yes, there needs to be discussion, there needs to be deliberation, but I don't think it's going to be a wholly rewrite of the entire, you know what I mean? It's just carrying over the standards and what we've expected in this part of town for the whole this part
It's
of town.
basically, I disagree. I think I agree with Jeff. I think it's basically closing a loophole.
Right.
I mean, there is nothing about this that isn't reflected in the town plan that was passed less than 3 months ago. That completely supports this, the dense walkable village.
I mean, certainly the town plan has, goals for dense, walkable, right? It also has language in it in 311 that says we ought to consider bigger grocery stores, right? So,
City Market, didn't they build another store because that store couldn't keep up? I mean, they would wait a half hour to park.
That's what Andrea was just talking about. There is
I'm
a new
sure
one.
City Market would have loved to have been able to build one building right there.
No,
Yeah. A lot more efficient. You don't have to hire 2 managers. If you don't have a big enough building here, we're still going to be driving to Williston.
So for
Hannaford,
sorry, I talked enough.
people go shopping somewhere else besides Lampman's because there's not enough stuff at Lampman's.
Okay.
No, it's
You know,
not necessarily true.
I mean, as far as closing a loophole, I get your argument, but at the same time, if I look at a lot of other uses in that commercial zone, right, they're generally one story, right? I mean, the exceptions are Dark Star, right, and a small portion of Nestec, and a small portion over Tailhook Towing, right? Is that the best use long-term for this area? Do we want to see more verticality? We have a Firehouse Plaza that's, 19,000 plus square feet today. What would we really like to see there if not Firehouse Plaza? Would we want to kind of give them the ability and incentive to go up?
Well,
But because that's
Right.
keeping in what we've said we want the vision to be. I'd rather have that than the sprawl of a
So
one-story,
let me
20,000
explore
square
that
foot.
just a little bit. So I'm Firehouse Plaza today, and I'm 19,000 square feet.
Right.
Right. and, you know, the town has encouraged me to go up, but my limit is 20,000 square feet.
Not gonna do it.
I'm not gonna go up,
Correct.
right?
Right.
I'm not gonna have more efficient use of the land because it's not
Correct.
economically
So,
thing. So I think we ought to think about footprint.
right.
Right, I think, right, a lot of these questions can't be answered tonight, but what I'm trying to put in front of the board is, you know, depending on a decision made tonight, you're entering into a process, and that process has some costs, and everybody has to realize that, right, before making the initial decision, right?
What could be more important than this particular process, because this is going to affect the whole town. If that may be the last big building that would ever be built in Hinesburg, but it is a building that will influence the future of this town in ways we don't know, but I don't think they're going to be good ways. So
I understand the opinion and I respect it, right? And it's very heartfelt and it's long developed. At the same time, I you know, I have to ask that this board react in a non-partisan manner. You know, make you know, weigh all the things that you've weighed and come to your decision, right? And weigh those same things and you know, make a decision for the town.
So, the feedback about the Firehouse Plaza, and it's, you know, 19,000 square foot, single story. I wouldn't want to see that go up. I think that's a big footprinted building with multiple uses, and that's great. So that's why I like the 20,000 square foot cap. It's where it is now. If Firehouse Plaza were to get torn down and something new go up, that's where I would come in with our standards of saying it's 20,000 square feet. We like dense, multi-story buildings, so it's not this, it's this, and it fits more into what we've been talking about for years, about this is what it should look like, this is how we see good design and the character of what we're going after. I don't think a 20,000 square foot single story footprint is where we want to see the town go. And I certainly would want to see that size go up right in the middle of that part of town. Right? I would, you know, like Nestec, I like it smaller, but it goes up. Kenny Drugs doesn't go up, but it appears it does. But a lot of the buildings around it, it's 2 stories. You got residential on top, you got the smaller retail on the bottom. I think the big 1-story mass footprint, 20,000 in my mind is big, but that's allowed in there, and I'm okay with that because there are buildings that size, but I wouldn't go bigger than that. And I would encourage smaller footprint and taller than sprawl and bigger. So my decision and my fervent, whatever you want to call it on this, it's not tied to the Hannaford discussion per se, or whether I'm for or against a Hannaford. I'm all for it. It's about the look and feel and character of this town, what we've been talking about for years, and I do see it as a loophole in my mind. And I hear what you're saying, and they're good points to be discussed. But I am very fearful that if we get into the process that takes so long and you get a building that goes in there that is that larger single story, it is going to change the character, and that we're not going to be able to undo.
No doubt.
And I just would hate to see 8-10 years of discussion, you know. So for me, that's why I'm saying it is critical for us to say we're trying to end this loophole and keep the character the way we've talked about. That's why I'm standing there. I've gone round and round to where I stand, so I think I want other people to have a chance.
Well, I do too. I think
say.
you and I have done a lot of talking.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? My name's Carl Wall, and this might be a question for Alex, but there's been a 20,000 cap on retail space a lot of places in the town, and I don't know all the different districts. So I guess you as a board have to decide why something over 20,000 makes sense somewhere else. And to me, it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense in the area that has almost no development, why does it make sense cramming it into Commerce Park or the commercial district? So it seems like one option is to put a sort of a temporary halt and figure it out, because we're either for 20,000 plus retail establishments in our town, or we're not. I happen to think it's not a good way to go, but it doesn't there's no logic to have it restricted in some areas,
Well-
but not in others. And the way it came across years ago, it almost was a loophole, because the only way you could do something larger was to tear things down, merge sites, or have wetlands disappear, which is what seemed to have happened, because no one thought that lot could be developed with that large a building. So you as a board have to sort of come to terms with, we can't build a 22,000 square foot retail building here, but just a little bit over here, now we can. That is sort of a very mixed vision and a very mixed message to us as community members, to a developer. So if there's a way to, in my mind, close that loophole the quickest way you can, and then figure out what the town wants, whether it's a townwide vote or something else, that's a better way to go than, okay, we're just gonna hope Hannaford's or someone else doesn't come in with something that we really haven't figured out. And I know this has been a divisive issue in our community, so let's do something that doesn't lead to more lawsuits. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I would encourage us not to, however we proceed, not to glom this issue onto the discussions we are going to have about density and phasing. That this not be part of it, and that we deal with this separately. This is going to be an open town-wide discussion. This is going to be a community discussion at our hearing and at the select board hearing, as it should be. And we're going to be getting a lot of feedback, and that's where it needs to happen. But this is I see it as and you mentioned in the town plan, consider discussion of, and by all means, let's have that discussion. But in the meantime, let's close that loophole. Let's extend, as Jeff said, extend this cap to the entire village. And then have the discussion. And if we decide to raise the cap for grocery stores, let's see where that takes us. But in the meantime, I think that we should close that loophole. And we should do it as a separate discussion and not push it off to our already scheduled discussions on the village.
My earlier comments were never meant in that vein. My earlier comments were, right, this would take priority should we take action on this. John, Barbara?
My feeling is that we need to separate this out from all the things we have before us that we've planned to talk about, and address this now to give us the time to work out what our presentation to the town would be and let the town, through that standard process, answer whether or not we support a different size for commercial and maybe for a particular kind of commercial, but to not allow that, I'll use the same language, the loophole that currently is there to lose an opportunity to make what I see as a desired change from the town's point of view. There's just too much history. I've read the minutes of the meetings that we've had years ago, and it always was there. This is uncharacteristic with our village. It is not the feel, the quality of life is not expressed by allowing a totally uncontrolled square footage. So if it's necessary to start a process to go through a town hearings and a decision by the select board after all of the time that we'll spend, that's what we should do, and we should start that tonight to make a decision to start that process now and move that up on our agenda and dealing with that in the next few months.
Barbara?
Well, thank you, Jeff, for pointing out the vision that we hold for our town, and that something bigger than 20,000 square feet doesn't fit. I have no concept of what 20,000 square feet was until you mentioned Kinney Drug and its size, and Kinney Drug seems pretty big to me. So what I would like in Hinesburg is something that maintains the walkability, the small town vision that we hold. And talking with residents who live in Thistle Hill, they're just flabbergasted that they're going to have to look down on something that's massive and flat and ugly. And as you pointed out, walking down Commerce Street, it is pretty bleak. So having some residences there or something different would be beneficial. And I support going for interim zoning tonight too. I mean, that it seems like we need to have some time to really further discuss this, and you've been on the board longer than I have, and you've been discussing it for years already. So let's just do something. Let's do it.
All right.
I'm more of the thinking of what you just shared. I think you said it eloquently, and I think it's a really big issue, and I'm not ready to make a decision at this point. And I don't support interim zoning. I think there's a reason why it didn't happen the other two times.
Well, I think the other two times were different. I think that every instance is different. If I look at the town's history with interim zoning, it's been asked to be applied 3 times. It's been accepted once. All right. Geez.
Okay.
All right. And not accepted twice. Basically, same reasons driving both of those requests.
Okay.
There were some other avenues that the select board decided to go through for those, ordinances for, water allocation, wastewater allocation, that actually seem to be working at the moment.
I mean, I could just see
Well
going
understood.
up to, also, and I've read a lot of the articles that I think Jeff probably has read, and I think you're absolutely right, that retail is going the direction of, everything you said, I think you're absolutely right about. But, maybe there's some other ideas out there, like you said, that are beyond our vision right now. It could be going up more with residential. I mean, that's where the greatest need is, and I think we only get the commercial because they want the residential. Over here, I really believe, because that's what fills up the quickest. So I just think it's a really big question, and I'm not ready to.
I think in this commercial area, I mean, they're going for commercial and office space usages because that's basically what's been on offer as the major things, and that's how that area filled out. And
But the residential, when they were offering it, is really filled up quickly.
Right.
And it could be a bigger picture there of that. I don't even remember about what was, I don't remember that well about what was proposed for Thistle Hill, but as you remember, there was a multi-story building or two proposed there that never happened, that was gonna be all residential. And then it didn't happen for, you know,
Yeah.
someone to partner with. So, this is a huge issue, I think.
So for the interim zoning, you don't think it's a good idea to try and hold it until we've had those discussions, or just
Right.
let things go as they go?
Correct. I think that I'm not in favor of interim zoning anytime.
Okay.
We've done it. I'm not. I think we need to do a lot more discussing and looking into things.
Interim zoning would allow that. Whereas, I mean, all of our discussion, all of our focus is because there's a proposal to build a very large building right in the center of our village. And that's what's driving this discussion, and that's why it's moving to the top of the list.
Right.
And the only way to buy the time, which might not be necessary, maybe Hannaford will not return.
Right.
I'm not as confident that, I'm not as confident as Alex is about that. It doesn't matter whether that business is returning or not. The opportunity to build a large building is there for any business right now. And we're saying we don't want it for any business.
I don't think that's what we're saying, really.
We don't want anything
Retail.
bigger
Just
than
retail.
20,000.
Retail.
Retail, yeah.
So not any building then.
Yeah.
Not any building, no.
That's what I mean. I mean, maybe would be a residential building. Who knows, you know?
Well, that would
And
take a
there's more to
change
explore.
in the zoning code to do that. Right now,
Well, it would be
residence is
commercial
not
on the
allowed.
first floor and then residential up
Up
is
above.
what I kind of was referring
Again,
to.
if, you know, I think that interim zoning or a different method is appropriate if we are, you know, thinking about reshaping what the district is. And, you know, we have talked about this district before, what it looks like, you know, how some of the buildings that are there today really operate and function and their limitations and you know, strip mall versus a more general purpose building, et cetera, et cetera. I think we could put in a more kind of village-centric vision for that area, right? It isn't, this isn't just one question. I really believe that if you're gonna start out on this process, you have to commit yourself, right, to a new vision for that zone as a whole.
Well said.
Yeah,
Very well said.
and how do we buy the time to do that?
Well, I mean, that's the kicker. I mean, if you're really gonna, you know, if you're really gonna commit yourself to that, right, then you have the two options that Alex laid out. We can take the conventional approach, right, and go through planning commission hearings and discussions and proposals and then send it to select board once, or we can, you know, recommend interim zoning. In fact, I don't even know that we need to recommend interim zoning. I don't think we ever recommended interim zoning for the cheese factory. I think it just happened.
No, we did.
Did we?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the recommendation came from the
Okay.
planning commission. Cause there was one other interim zoning instance that you didn't mention with regard to our energy efficiency standards for new homes. And that also came from the planning commission
Okay.
to select board, like,
Well-
you should change this, the Energy Star rating is about to increase.
That's
and we-
right. Well,
We don't want people to be held to that standard and.
My two brain cells are failing, so.
I know.
But mark my words, this is a very controversial issue
Yeah.
in this community, regardless of who's present in this
Uh-huh.
room tonight.
Uh-huh.
And if you kick it to the select board and make them have a public hearing, they're gonna feel that controversy, so
Oh, yeah.
it's up to
It has to
you.
Well,
happen
which is-
somewhere, and we need
which
to
is a
start
good
the
thing.
conversation
Absolutely,
somewhere.
I'm just
Right.
saying
So
that
let this be a start to
there's,
the conversation.
there's,
And
that
it will
conversation is
be-
going to happen and with of the full community at
Yeah.
some point.
Right.
As
Which
it,
is a
as
good
it should.
thing.
That's what
As it
should
should.
happen. We shouldn't shy away from this because it will be controversial. I just,
No, but
Don't
it's
think
not,
that's what our job is. Our
But-
job is to look at what the town wants to have as our future village, for our kids, for the future. That's what I feel my job is here.
I agree. I just the nuances of planning and zoning is not the select board's strength. So your recommendation to them should be simple. So if your recommendation is extend the cap, that's simple. I think that's easy for the select board to deal with. If it needs to be more nuanced than that, then you should figure
Then
it out.
we need to deal
You
with
should
it.
discuss
Right,
it, and
exactly.
you should take the full brunt of the community's,
Absolutely.
controversy.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you want it to be simple, then make a simple suggestion to the select board and let them decide. I mean, they'll have to talk about it in a meeting. They'll have to decide whether they want to warn a public hearing, all that stuff.
And that's what I think I was recommending in the meeting, was the 20,000 mark. But let me, just, because I want to react to.
I want to hear Dennis and James as
All right.
well.
I'll shush. It was just, yeah, never mind.
Your turn.
I'm up.
Yeah, it's your turn to be on the stump.
I'm sure I'm in the minority, but, I'm not for interim zoning. I've been through this with Kinney's. We had a lot of the same issues. I know the building's not the same size, but it was gonna ruin our community, and and I think it's a success story, except for maybe the blue roof, but.
I like the blue room.
See, we all have different opinions. I don't know, I think we can discuss it amongst ourselves and try to figure it out. I know I'm kind of with you, and I think you're thinking the same way I am. It's more about Hannaford's than the whole district. I just feel that's the way it is. Maybe that's not how you're thinking, but
Yeah.
that's the way I feel.
I
I
mean,
think it's,
yeah, I mean,
I just
every-
don't think
every
that's the
time
right
I
way to
use a
go.
business in Commerce Park, I think of what could have been overall. I don't think it's a very efficient development area, and
I mean, we could buy it for, it's still on the, we could buy it as a public park still, right?
Yes.
well, I mean, that's actually something that the select board, tasked a group of people to look at, long ago, and they decided, I mean, that piece of property could have been, a real test of the official map. It was a test of the official map in some other ways in the end, but they basically decided not to take that path.
I think we should extend the 20,000 square foot retail cap to the commercial areas. I think we can, I think that we can pass this idea to the select board and let more discussion happen there.
Just gonna make one final comment. It just
No,
has to do.
I don't mind you making all the comments you want. I
This is-
just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
we heard from everybody.
So it has to do with the interim zoning and having the discussion conversation. So, and I may be wrong, but I feel the conversation that had to do with Lot 15, most of it played out during a DRB semi-legal hearing process with a candidate sitting in there saying, this is what we're going to do, and the town giving feedback. And it was a little bit back and forth between a developer and the town. And what I'm saying is, I'd like to see it to be a conversation with the town without that other, this is what we're doing and proposing. It kind of goes to everybody wanted something and they said, no, this is what we want. I think interim zoning gives us that, where we can have a conversation as a town before something happens we can't change and can discuss what do we want there. Now, my standpoint is based on the village, but many people in this town clearly, to Alex's point, it's a divisive issue. But I'd rather see us as a town discuss it than a developer and the town discussing it. that's where I'm coming from with the interim zoning. But that's just my 2 cents on that. So.
I mean, shame on the town. You won't be having a discussion with the town. You'll be having discussions with the people that are against it.
With the people that are against. There were a lot of folks there who were for it too. So,
But
and
normally,
so we can
I'm not. It's
have them come
definitely
in.
not
and-
right, but I'm just saying that's usually the way it goes.
I mean, I don't quite get the shame on the town. I think we're probably 50-50 split as a town, right? As we have been
I
on
mean,
some other
coming to the
countries.
meetings and coming.
Alex's
Yeah.
wonderful survey that he sent out a few
I mean,
years
that
ago.
was 400 people.
That for sure was at least 50-50.
Yeah.
Because I read it 3 times over, every comment. So I want to see a discussion with the town for sure, more.
I guess, Marie, then, so you want to have the conversation. I'd like to have the conversation. Because then the next question is, and you know, I've kind of gotten the feeling for everybody around the table, you know, how to facilitate that conversation. And we either do nothing, that doesn't facilitate a conversation, or we take, you know, one of 2 paths, and you know, one path has you know, basically drives a conversation that is consequential in terms of how the town develops in the future, and the other one may or may not be. It's all timing and logistics.
What was the survey that you?
Alex did a survey a few years ago, he can speak to it better than I, that I think he spent a lot of time on, and,
What was the specific question? That you
oh,
were
there was
referring
a million questions.
to? It seemed like you were referencing,
Some of them were about Hannaford's.
but we're not just talking about. whether
No,
you
I
want
know
Hannaford or
that.
not.
Correct, but I think, like Dennis said, it seems like this is a lot about Hannaford's. Unfortunately, I don't want it to be, because I don't want to have an opinion one way or the other.
And yeah, I mean, that's.
I
you know,
really
I
want you
that's-
to know that, I
Exactly,
don't.
I'm asking the board to think about, you know, not a single issue, but
Correct.
think about,
Right.
you know, development going in the future. You know, we worked on Village Northwest, we worked on Village Northeast, those were more or less blank slates, right? We talked about the commercial area before, we've talked about, you know, how we might, you know, transform, right, that area to be more, you know, cohesive.
Right.
Right, so I don't think we're out of the ballpark here, but we have to approach it from that point of view.
Right. I agree.
All right, so, we've been around the table. I have absolutely no time, no idea what the time is, and how to, you know, how to go from here.
So I can make a motion and we can
Okay,
discuss that if you'd like.
fair enough.
So I make a motion that we send a request to the select board for interim zoning in the commercial district until we've had a chance to discuss setting the 20,000 square foot retail size limit in that area as in the rest of the village growth area. I don't want to say closing the loophole, but that's what I'm getting at.
All right.
Or discuss, you know, well, I'll just leave the motion there.
So the motion would, we asked the select board to install interim zoning on the commercial districts. And that interim zoning puts a cap on the size of retail stores in those districts.
I don't think interim zoning puts a cap, interim zoning. Yeah, you can put interim zoning that puts a cap on the size.
We have to say don't we have to say something about what the interim zoning is?
So yes,
We got a weird legal opinion the last time we did interim zoning that our previous efforts in doing it, we had been doing wrong. And I wish my synapses would fire and make me remember that, but I thought that what the legal opinion was is that interim zoning would be used to just put a stop on the development and not temporarily enact specific measures. But I still think that what you're really saying is enact that measure in that district, and you should just recommend that to the select board and let them figure it out with counsel, with advice
Figure
from
out
the.
what the actual wording
Yeah.
is to do that.
So
Yeah.
remembering a couple tidbits about that conversation about the mechanics. What I kind of remember is that an opinion saying that if you invoked interim zoning, that's essentially a second path, or I would say a parallel path that the applicant could file and could come into the DRB, but at the same time, the select board would really have the final decision about whether it met the goals of interim zoning or not.
Yeah, I remember that as well. But there's just a wrinkle that I'm stuck on but again, it doesn't sound like you want to wait. So if the motion is to push this forward, the select board will engage, I'm sure, will engage council and get, clarity before they take any action to make sure they do it right. I'll certainly recommend they do that.
Yeah. Marilee, did you have something to say, or you just kind of stretching and?
If the interim zoning simply puts a cap of 20,000 square feet on a building, there's nothing complicated about it.
I don't think
About that.
it does that. I think it's just a moratorium on development. To give the plan, the purpose of it is to give the planning commission time to think through and have discussions and hearings and work out whatever issue it is. And I think the clock starts as soon as select board passes it, so we'd have X amount of time to work on. And when we were talking about the north of the village, the last time, this septic stuff. Yeah, I think it was just a moratorium on development, and that's what the VLCT person had recommended, that if you need time to work this stuff out and to planning commission needs time, then that's the way to go. Is
Right. And I think remember back to this is it basically. I think it would allow the applicant to continue through the DRB, and then the select board could either
that sounds
reject
right.
or reject it or accept the proposal if they so chose, based on the benefits they saw to the community.
So you're saying that it's a moratorium on development
in a particular zone.
in a particular area, and
That's what I'm
there's a
remembering.
certain time frame then, if the select board puts that in place, there's a certain time to resolve that it can exist as interim
There is. I think
and moratorium.
It's like 1 year with the ability to extend.
Yeah, 1 year with the ability to extend for a second.
Yeah.
But I'm confused about what that attorney's advice was. I know that we had done something incorrect in the past and we had been schooled on it, and we just don't do interim zoning enough for me to have it straight in my head. So if you want to make the motion that Jeff's trying to make, I would make it clear what your intent is, like enact interim zoning so as to give us time to consider extending this cap to the commercial district, and let the select board figure out with the advice of council how it needs to read.
So the purpose behind this would be to give us time to hold our hearings, to hold our discussions, then our hearings, and then it would still
and make a final
Go-
recommendation.
It would still
So
go to-
without, so I won't say without the concern of buildings getting built that are counter to what we're discussing. Because it sounds like that will continue and then the select board will decide yea or nay because of the interim zoning. But it puts the town and the select board, everybody on notice that we're talking about this.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if it means that we could start our discussions at this level and make it public and invite people in. And then the conversation continues at the select board level.
Well, let's be clear, I mean, if you enter into interim zoning, or the select board enters interim zoning, right, you're committed, right, to having that discussion after the fact. You're on the clock.
Yeah.
Right?
So if the other way, and this is just for my clarification on the process. So one is, hey, we need interim zoning so we can discuss the 20,000 square foot cap. Is the other option just, hey, we recommend applying the 20,000 square foot cap across the commercial period and sending it to the select board? Or that's where we're end rounding the normal process, without having our public
two
hearings.
different processes. If you want to change the zoning bylaws for commercial district, right, we would set about that motion, we would hold, right, a public hearing, and then we would send it to the select board, right? And there are, obviously, there are warning periods around each of those things, right? Versus, the alternative, which is to, right, follow through on your motion, get someone to second you, right, make the recommendation to the select board, right, they will have to go through a hearing on this and make a decision. I don't know whether it's one hearing or two hearings or on their
One.
part, one.
I mean, first they're gonna have to talk about it and understand what you've
Right.
proposed and decide whether amongst the five of them, they even think that's a good idea.
That's right.
Then they're gonna need to get some legal counsel as to how to word it properly so that I can write it or an attorney can write it up. And then if they wanna move forward, they'd warn a public hearing.
So then I suppose my motion is a stand, is I recommend that we send a letter to the select board requesting interim zoning in the commercial district while we discuss applying the 20,000 square foot retail limit into the commercial district as it is for the rest of the village zoning area. That would be my motion.
I would second that.
All right, discussion?
This probably wouldn't even get on the select board agenda for how long? I mean, I can't, I'm not seeing that
Yeah, but again,
two and two thing.
that shouldn't change our decision.
It's up to the chair and the zoning administrator how things get on the agenda.
Town administrator.
Oh, yeah, sorry, town administrator.
But they're very busy right now. If that's what you're implying, yes. The budget time is happening. This is the peak of the budget time.
Yep.
But again, I don't think that's a basis for your decision.
No, it's not.
So there's something said at the beginning of this discussion, we could do one or the other or both.
One or the other, or both.
Yeah, well, I had explained you can either go through your normal process or you can make a request to the select board for interim zoning, and Bill properly pointed out, well, you can really do both. You can make that request to the select board, they can stop things through interim zoning, and you can proceed with your regular process. And I think Joe clarified that you would have to do that. That's the whole point of the clock, is to give you a year or maybe two to figure it out.
I think when we've talked about this before, we've always said that you don't get into interim zoning without a plan to get out of interim zoning.
Right.
Right. Sooner rather than later.
Well, it seems our plan is pretty clear. We'd like to institute the 20,000 square foot cap in the commercial zone.
We just need to find a way to do that among the 9 of us or the 8 of us.
And And those type of discussions were on our agenda for this year anyway. I think the design standards in the village growth area was something that we had. Now, granted, this kind of pushes that up, but it's not like it's, you know, it's something that was on the agenda anyway.
It's not a left turn.
You haven't taken your vote yet.
No, we have not taken a vote yet. Any further discussion? All right.
To repeat the motion?
Yes, please.
Um,
Thank you.
Don, can you repeat it?
Okay.
Don't
You want me
put
to
her
say
on
it
the
again?
spot.
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Please.
Say it
You gotta get
again,
it.
please.
I gotta get it.
I move that the planning commission send a request for interim zoning for the commercial district to the select board to give us time to discuss applying the 20,000 square foot retail size limit that is part of the rest of the village zoning area to that commercial zoning district.
One more time.
Oh, you're killing me. Move that the planning commission send a request for interim zoning for the commercial district to the select board so we can discuss applying the 20,000 square foot retail size limit standard. I can just stop there, but as is found in the rest of the village growth area.
I thought we were
Zoning.
talking about doing a bigger than that.
We can. And we can, well, I don't know, but
Well,
I
speak
would,
to it.
the interim zoning would stop, and we're asking for the interim zoning because of the 20,000 square foot, but we can discuss all of it, how we do all the other stuff. It just really is to let us have that conversation before shovels go in grounds.
I would hope that we're asking for interim zoning to look at what we want as a long-term plan
That's
for
what
the
I meant.
entire zone.
That's what I meant.
So do you want to make an amendment?
I would like to make that amendment.
See, I'm getting this
That
process
was my,
down, right?
I don't need to talk tonight because Joe's just coming
No,
out
you
with
need to-
everything I'm
No,
thinking.
you need to talk, Mary.
But I'm not saying it well. You're doing a way better job.
So I agree with you. The only reason why I specified the 20,000 square foot limit was because I was hearing, if you put specificity as to why you're doing something to the select board, it makes it easier to grasp and understand versus we just want to do a wholesale redesign of everything. That's what I was taking the recommendation of keep it simple and focused.
They can decide.
I would like to keep it broad because I'm not really sure that I agree with you on 20,000 square feet. Right? I have driven through Commerce Park quite a bit and thought about what Commerce Park could and should be. So I think that if we go into interim zoning, for me, right, I am there, and so I'll offer the amendment that this is not to consider 20,000 square feet. This is to consider the future development and redevelopment of Commerce Park into a more I used the word earlier. What was it? Integrated.
More in line with the village growth.
Yeah.
Well, more in line, not just with the village growth area, but with the greater village area, right?
Okay.
I mean, more contiguous, more. I'm out of words. I'm tired, but.
Okay, so now what?
So is that an
Is there a
amendment?
second on Joe's
That was an amendment, rambling though it was.
So I will second that.
Okay.
Can
Thank you.
that amendment include the 20,000 cap also? Can both those things be
I mean,
subject of discussion?
interim zoning is interim zoning. You're basically handing the reins over to the select board to make a final decision, right, on development. It's the way I understand it, right? I think Marilee's probably, hurriedly and back trying to look up statute, and Alex may be doing the same thing.
No, I'm not doing it.
It's too late.
You're reading email, right? I mean, for me, if we're doing this, we're reworking the vision, trying to get something that fits better overall.
So to answer John's question, the interim zoning just stops any development in the commercial district. My thing was saying, just to talk about 20,000, Joe's amendment says it's not just about 20,000, it's about the entire district and how it integrates with the larger village areas.
So since
I'm
the,
paraphrasing, but that's the gist.
Paraphrasing. I wouldn't say that it stops development. Development can still continue,
Yes.
but there's a secondary, there's a second parallel decision process. That's my understanding of.
I think you're right, Joe, but I think that for the select board to be able to make an intelligent decision about whether a particular development does meet the interim zoning standards and should be allowed to go forward, it's better to have specificity over what the issue that needs to be resolved is. If the issue is broad, as you said, then it seems like almost anything should be denied by the select board, because you've said we want to remake
gonna
this
look at it all.
district. Whereas if this really is being driven by the size of a retail establishment, then for Dark Star to add on to their building and do more non-retail should be able to skirt right through the select board's interim zoning review process and get a positive nod, right? Because it's not retail and it's, so just be careful what, how much you want to tie things up in that district, whether it's any development or just development related to this one issue.
I mean, I understand you're wanting to make this a broader discussion, to not have isolated issues, but we've already, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that we don't want large flat boxes in the rest of the village. I mean, we have that retail cap.
Well, let's be clear, the retail cap doesn't necessarily say no large, one-story boxes, just as it can only be that big. You're still gonna get the one-story box unless you tell people
True.
that
Right.
one-story boxes aren't allowed.
But so this isn't really saying anything new. It's just applying that standard to this area in the village. We still need to have the broader discussions about phasing and density, building heights, all of that. And we will. And Commerce Park,
it's part of that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
we're all
Yes,
kind of
Bill.
losing focus here.
So you had a motion, it was seconded, then you had a proposed amendment, which was seconded. I think that's where you are. You might want to vote on the amendment first, and then vote on the motion, whether it's amended or not.
So, all in
Sweet.
favor of the amendment,
I'd like to hear it again.
That Marie
right, then I might have to have someone
No,
else.
Joe made it.
or Joe made.
Because it didn't make sense the first time.
Oh, you seconded, thanks.
No, I didn't.
No.
Marie seconded.
I
Marie
did,
seconded.
yeah, I did.
So, my motion was to amend the original motion from Jeff, right, to state that the goal of interim zoning, right, was to review and update, right, the overall goals and, zoning regulations of the commercial district to better integrate with the surrounding districts.
That's what you seconded, right, Sorry.
Can I take it back?
And please, somebody have written that down, because
I just wrote
my main retention, my
It is.
retention time is like 0.
So you should vote on
So we got a second on that?
Well,
Can I take
I
it
don't know,
back?
do it.
Yeah, you.
What did I
you
say
are not
wrong?
seconding that.
I don't in favor of recommending interim zoning, so I can't second that. If I can take it back. Everything else you said I'm in favor of. Or,
May I say something? now it's a break, there has to be specificity in interim zoning. You need to give the select board specific guidance. And my understanding from this discussion here tonight is you have a clear majority of people who do not want retail stores in this district greater than 20,000 square feet, period. And I think you have one more who is not here, who I'm quite sure also would support that.
Speak for him, Bill.
No, but that's beside the point. You have a majority tonight who believe that from all the discussion I've heard. You need to have a directive, a request to the select board with that specific request that they prohibit on an interim basis buildings in this district of greater than 20,000 feet. Now that's arbitrary, but it's not entirely arbitrary. It comes from a very specific source. But you can still add, as you're reasoning in the letter, everything you said, and other things can be done. But the interim zoning has to relate to a specific restriction, so that it can be readily enforced. There's no questions, and I would simply request that somebody on the commission add that to your amendment, and that they vote on that, so the select board knows what you want. And I think that's what a majority of you want.
Well, then, I think if we want to go back to the original, motion, then we should vote on my motion, and if the majority don't agree with it, then it gets rejected. And I think that's how we get ourselves out of where we are,
Okay, so why don't you call a vote on?
Well, I was trying to.
So we're voting on your amendment to the
We're
motion.
voting on my amendment. Well, all in favor, say aye. I'm gonna vote for my amendment. All opposed, say no.
No.
Amendment does not pass.
It was a very nice amendment, though.
Thank you.
So now we're back to the original.
Yes.
Want me to read it
Let's
again?
read the original.
Move to send request for interim zoning on the commercial district to the select board so we can discuss and apply the standard 20,000 square foot retail limit as found in the rest of village zoning.
Discussion. I'll start discussion. So, is the motion to ask the select board to do interim zoning so we can discuss 20,000 square feet, or is it also asking the select board to 20,000 square feet? Because if you're worried about my non-guidance test for the failed amendment, that has the same problem. If you're just saying, so we can discuss it.
Well, so we can have hearings, get input, feedback.
Can we do those without? Can we
So-
have hearings without it?
Yeah, can we put the 20,000 on without hearings?
I guess that's kind of what I'm asking, is the board, nervous about telling the select board what they want,
No.
right? Well, then you should tell the select board what you want in your amendment and be clear about it.
So you're saying, so I should amend my, can I amend my own?
You can
Yes, we
withdraw
do.
your current amendment and submit another.
So you're suggesting. So, move to send the request for interim zoning on commercial district to the select board to apply the 20,000 square foot retail limit standard as found in the rest of the village zone.
Or so that we can hold hearings, go through the process of.
So this is where let me just be clear. I agree with Joe. I would like to talk about the whole district and what does the whole thing look like.
Yeah.
I do. But what I'm also hearing is, as a matter of, I won't say policy, but specificity, is it helps to say, really, the crux of the reason that's kicking into the interim zoning is the size of the building. There's a lot more to it, but that's the main thing. And if we give that main thing, then as development things go through DRB and come up, if the select board says yes, interim zoning, and they come up to the select board knows that's the key thing, is the size of the buildings. So, I don't know, can we merge the two? I just don't. You know what I mean? I'm stuck in I want to look at the whole thing and make it integrate with everything else, but I also want to have the specificity that gives clarity to the select board, as per Alex's mentioned.
I don't think, I mean, what you're doing
Attendant.
is you're just trying to send a message to the select board, and we're not invoking interim zoning by this message that you're sending to the select board. You're saying these are the reasons that we would like it, and then we can, the combination of the planning commission and the select board can work out the details of wording to incorporate what wants to be in the interim zoning, but we're not writing the motion of what the select board is going to vote on at this point. I think that's my understanding, is you're really sending a message to from the planning commission to the select board and asking that this be considered for these reasons, and then, and I think including the concepts that you've spoken about tonight, which includes the 20,000, includes the idea of integrating it into, including the criteria that are used for site plan review in the other village district, would be appropriate. That really, that is the goal from everything that I heard the majority of people saying, is that you feel that that Commerce Park should be better integrated with the design standards that, and site plan. It's basically, we don't have too many design planners. We have site planning standards that are and square footage for the other buildings in the village district. And, we did have this discussion at the planning commission level, sometime before 2010. And it was talked about not having a commerce district, and that it would all be part of the village district. So, it certainly, so that's my 2 cents on how you
Andrea,
would.
you're saying that we we make it clear to the select board that the cap, the 20,000, is critical to us, but we also have to then enumerate why that is an issue for us.
I think what you want to convey to the select board is what this discussion was, and that your recommendation is that it's appropriate to enact interim zoning because of these various issues that need to be resolved before further development happens within that district. And that you bullet point those, but not saying that that is what the interim zoning wording is going to be, because as Alex has suggested, the select board would need to have legal counsel to go through it. So what you're trying to convey is the gist of this conversation that you had tonight.
And the urgency of the matter.
Can we vote on Jeff's motion?
I think Jeff's rewriting the motion as we speak.
I'm taking note. I can try to whip up a motion out of it if you'd like, but
We did have an original one.
we still have our original one, yes. So do we need to vote on it? Do I withdraw it?
Didn't you just modify the original one and make it even more?
Well, we have to make a motion.
The original one is still sitting out there and has been seconded. So
Right.
it either has to be voted on, right? Or do I withdraw it, or do I come up with a new one? We can do this all night. I just don't know what the process and procedures are.
Rules of order.
I think the person who made the motion can withdraw.
All right.
If you want. You could also demand a vote on it because it's been made and seconded. So make up your mind, Mr. French, and then,
No, Jeff, I thought you had then crafted another one that focused your first amendment very much to the 20,000 square foot cap.
That was my original
Then let's vote on that.
motion,
Well,
was
let's vote on that
the interim
motion.
zoning
Yeah,
to
let's-
apply the 20,000 square foot
Yeah.
retail size limit.
Okay, okay.
Can you read it? Please? Someone?
You're the leader.
I don't
It's
have it
already been
written down.
seconded, right?
Did you want him to repeat the original one?
I would like,
You still have your original one written down, Jeff, right?
humor me.
The original one was move to send request.
Sorry, can I ask you to slow down just a little bit? There's been a lot of.
It's important
All right.
for this to be
So-
written in the real record.
So we're sitting on the original motion that I had made, however long ago that is. Move to send request for interim zoning on the commercial district to the select board to apply the 20,000 square foot retail limit standard as found in the rest of village zoning. That was the original one. Basically interim zoning, 20,000 square foot limit.
Somebody already seconded it?
Yeah, yeah.
John had seconded it. Then we did the amendment, and we said no to the amendment, so now we're back to that original one.
All right, so I guess it's time to call a vote. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna vote in the affirmative. It's not everything that I wanted, but I like the conversation. Those opposed, vote no.
No.
Okay.
Okay, you guys have it.
So that means you're charged now with fleshing this out in terms of what actually goes to the select board?
I'm
What,
gonna send
why we
Town administrator tomorrow,
saying this is coming.
a summary of this, saying that the motion passed, what the motion was, and,
I'm thinking more about the reasons we want to do this,
yeah,
which,
I'm not, I can put a little bit of, I can flesh that out a little bit, but I don't want to write a treatise on it, because
Yeah, maybe
I
it's
think
not
you'd need to
necessary.
review that. I think we ought to just send the motion, because you wanted it done expeditiously.
yeah,
And I'll add that, there was a very long discussion before the motion was approved. And the select board's welcome to review the minutes or the tape, and the planning commission would be happy to,
Come and meet
come
with
and meet with them
them
to
and-
talk further about this issue.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to go to that planning commission.
yeah, I would go.
Sit there.
So no letter transferred is needed? Just
It is.
a message transferred, verbal message?
No, I'll send it via email, so it's in writing, with the actual motion that you just passed, and reference to this meeting, so they can, they know which meeting to go look at minutes or recordings of.
Okay.
Yep.
And then let us know whether or not this has been put onto the agenda
Onto
for the
their
select
agenda,
board
yep.
and when that might.
Yeah, I'll definitely get back to you on that. Yep. They're meeting weekly, so I don't know if
But
they'll
again,
take
they're
it up
dealing
in the
with-
next several meetings, or if it'll get put off till after the budget's finished.
Yeah.
Like
That's-
Andrea said,
that's
that'll be
their
up
call.
to Phil and Renee to decide.
Yep.
Okay. Alex, I think it's pretty late. I don't know that we want to cover minutes tonight.
You wanna put those off to your next meeting?
Put those off.
Okay.
No, I have to work.
Oh, yeah.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Just-
So move.
All right, thank you, everybody.